This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series is brought to you by Maloir Transport, oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec. Visit their website on www.maloir-transport.ca. Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTM for tonight's coverage of Season 4, Round 2 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Maloir Transport and live exclusively on TRTN. As always, I am Regan Clark, and you join us here on our second and last stop to mainland Spain as we advance up the east coast. From what was an exciting open to the season in Valencia, we advance further north to the northeasternmost region of Catalonia, here at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. Founded in 1989, and opened its doors for the first time in 1991. The circuit as we find it today in its pre-2022 configuration is comprised of 16 turns and 2.9 miles of FIA Grade 1. Former home of the Spanish Grand Prix, now this year home to the Barcelona Catalunya Grand Prix in Formula 1 as one of two destinations in Spain on the F1 calendar for 2026, and we'll talk about the results of that race having just ran last weekend later on in our news segment today. Outside of Formula 1 racing though, it also sees Grand Prix from the MotoGP series on two wheels as the Catalan Grand Prix. In endurance racing, it sees competition from the European Le Mans Series, the 24-Hour Series, and the GT World Challenge Europe Series, and it sees touring car racing from TCR Europe. Last but not least then, Cup car racing rounds out the last of its major events, with this year seeing the return of Ferrari Challenge and its finale Mondiale round for 2026. Rather peculiarly, it also saw a brief stint in off-road racing. This modified version of Sector 3 could be found as part of the 2015 to 2022 calendar roster of the FIA World Rallycross Championship as the Rallycross of Catalunya. That specific variation can be found on games like Dirt Rally 2.0. Outside of motorsports in its entirety, it hosted parts of the 1992 Summer Olympics. This track finds itself as one of four key destinations in the testing apparatus of Formula 1, alongside Imola, Silverstone and Fiorano. It has helped contribute towards the testing and development of the last several regulation waves of the last 2 decades. And tonight will serve as the battleground for round 2 of the championship. We caught briefly on what was a bit of a troubled start to this free practice session here for the man with a significant target on his back. Wishful winnings, of course, after taking his win in Valencia. Now finds himself at the head of the table. But before we get into the talks of the championship standings, a few bits of housework to cover here as we take a look in towards the session regs for today. Sees the first of the newly reformed dash races introduced to this season, formerly the double sprints from last season. We now see two longer sessions in the racing part for 40 minutes on each session. Otherwise, 30 minutes for qualifying before that, staggered down into thirds between Am, Pro-Am and Pro, or otherwise the semi-pros, with the first 10 minutes over to the Am, the middle 10 minutes over to the Pro-Ams or semi-pros, depending on who you ask, and the last 10 minutes over towards the pros. Both 40-minute races will have no mandatory pit stops. Taking a look away then from the regs, just before we talk on the championship standings, having a look at some recent roster changes that will see 5 drivers shift category after round 1 of the championships. Heading in towards round 2, we see recent promotions then for Ivan Sanchez and Fabian Yahure. Yahure shifting up to pro and Sanchez shifting up to semi-pro. 3 relegations then, with Isaac McMillan dropping to semi-pro, Didier Potvin and Brandon Carr drop from semi-pro to Am for the run in towards round 2 of the championship. Taking a look in towards the championship standings, starting things off with the teams to see that Maloir Racing lead in all 3 categories. 33 points in semi-pro, 41 in Am, but the most amount of points coming from the Pro division, which ranks in 58 points after round 1 of the championship. Looking in the Pro standings alone, Team 16 marks 2nd place with GeForce in 3rd, Breaking Point Racing in 4th, and Milk Crate Racing rounds out the top 5. In semi-pro, Team 16 once again on 2nd place in the semi-pros, and Fora de Curva round out the top 3. Breaking Point Racing once again on 4th, but Florid Engineering rounds out the top 5 in semi-pro. Last but not least then, the AM Championships for the teams finds Team Raceline Sim in 2nd, Breaking Point Racing in 3rd, Let's Race Mate in 4th, and Florid Engineering once again as a fixture of the top 5. Taking a look then back in towards the session onto the Drivers' Championship standings, and starting things off then with a look into the AM Championship. Right now, as it stands to be the case, Didier Potvin leads over Cedric Grenier-Massé by 3 points after Valencia at round 1 of the championship. New driver to the field, Matthew Shanosky, makes 3rd place with Ray Risti in 4th. Adrian Malherbe rounds out the top 5 with 19 points. Behind them, Casey Miles in 6th. Curtis Belbray in 7th, and rounding out the scoring positions behind Belbray is Karina Stinson on a rather controversial move to Maserati. She raked in only 11 points at the end of Valencia actually 2 weeks ago, as we did have some technical troubles in the week prior. Looking in towards the semi-pro standings to find, as it stands to be the... Oh, pardon me. So there's something stuck in my throat. Isaac McMillan leads the chart over Aidan Christie, Adam Jeffrey in 3rd, and Ruben Pereira makes 4th place. Brad Peacock in 5th, and Joey Fisher in 6th, Adrian Zavala in 7th, and Ivan Sanchez in 8th. Looking towards the back end of the top 10, we find the 9th position at the moment occupied by Andrew Veldkamp with only 9 points to his name, a joint 10th then at the back of the field for the Jackal, who DNF'd in the first race of the championship. 0 points there, but he finds himself joined in with a few other drivers towards the back end of the non-scoring positions of the semi-pro standings. Last but not least then, the top end of the pyramid, the pro standings, and taking a look after his maiden win in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, Wishful Winnings leads over 3-time champion Christian Lebay for the run in towards tonight's round. Brandon David in 3rd. And we see in 4th place Justin Benton with 21 points. A rather controversial race with the top 5 of that grid heading out of Valencia. Rounding out the top 5 though, David Tanguay ahead of Fabian Yahure on his recent promotion to the pro standings. He slots into 6th ahead of Vincent Simard in 7th. We find in 8th place then Carl Martel. 9th place behind him George Todd. Rounding out the top 10 then is Clinton Bourne. So after a little bit of a snafu trying to get the readings out there, I'm not even sure what happened. I think that was just a bit of spit that got lodged in the back of our throats there. Not very comfortable. We do see on the timing charts at the moment, just before the end of free practice and before we head in towards 10 minutes of qualifying, with the AMs starting off, then the semi-pros, then the pros, and a 10-minute split. You find Christian Lebay fastest in the session. Wishful Winnings, of course, still reveling in his victories in Valencia. Finds himself only, as it stands, just under 4 tenths away from the lead of free practice. In 3rd place, though, Brandon David, who, if you remember, catching on with not too long ago in our coverage of the final round of Season 4 of the HCCR Multi-Class Championship, was a prospective challenger to the throne in GT4, ultimately fell short to then defending and now 2-time GT4 champion Matthias de Munster. He'll look to fare his odds a little bit better here in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. George Todd makes 4th and David Tanguay rounds out the top 5. It's still worth noting here for Mercedes, they do find themselves staring down the barrel of a possible advantage, similar to what they saw in Valencia, where they took wins in all 3 divisions at the end of that first round of the championship 2 weeks ago. As we drop into the last 2.5 minutes of free practice, let's get a glance in towards balance of performance listings that'll actually see, unlike Chevrolet or Mercedes, it will see Aston Martin to great advantage in tonight's rounds. That'll be great news here for Breaking Point Racing's Chili Peppers on his recent signing over to the team. The number 24 will find himself lightest, and that'll be the same story for drivers like Didier Potvin and Ray Risti. 20 kilos then shed off of the V8 Vantage for tonight's round of the championship. Audi find themselves the only other manufacturer to be shedding weight, so that'll be great news for Aidan Christie, of course best known from last season's performance where he saw a win on debut to the AM category at the circuit Paul Ricard, the number 32, which we also saw over on the multi-class championship over on HCCL last weekend. Looking to fare his odds better in the semi-pros. He'll lose a single kilo in towards this round. BMW start off the listings then for weight gain with a single kilo onto the M4. Mercedes follow them with 5 kilos. Maserati with 6. McLaren with 9. And then we find 11 kilos on for both Chevrolet and Porsche. It's Alpine to be at the proper short end of the stick, and that's going to be horrible news for a recent transfer to Alpine, that being Brandon Carr, who dropped points in the championship for moving vehicles, having shifted now over towards Alpine at possibly the worst time for the French manufacturer. The A110 then, darling child of the Genesis years of the World Rally Championship turned GT4 racer, now finds itself much heavier than expected for the run towards tonight's round, but there is a silver lining to all of this for the case of Brandon Carr, who currently leads the AMs here in free practice over Didier Potvin in Division 2nd, and 3rd then for Adrian Malherbe. Meanwhile, division standings for the semi-pros finds Joey Fisher fastest over Isaac McMillan on his recent drop from the pro category down towards semi-pro. He slots in a lot closer there, only as it stands to be the case 105 thousandths away from Fisher at the forefront of the semi-pros, rounding out the top 3 for semi-pros right now. Recent transfer to Breaking Point Racing, number 24, Aston Martin of Chili Peppers. And of course, up in the pros, as we do note there was a disconnect for one of the drivers, but it wasn't one of the top 3, as we see Vincent Simard engaging in a little bit of drifting here. Of course, a growing tradition over at the Malwar race team. Have quite a phenomenal set of drifters on them, to be completely frank here. If it weren't for the fact that they are quite formidable talents in GT4, I would say there's definitely a career prospect in competitive drifting for some of these drivers. They are quite proficient with it, and it does come as quite a surprise to see someone so effortlessly hoon around a 550 plus horsepower Chevrolet. One not specifically designed to have the back end much looser than that. We see Wishful Winnings then second. Brandon David rounds out the top three at the end of free practice today. So, as mentioned before, taking a look back in towards those regulations just before the start of qualifying, split down into thirds. The first 10 minutes coming up towards the AM drivers, then the semi-pros, and then the pros into these 30 minutes of qualifying to follow here in the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. A stacked out grid, north of 30 drivers for tonight's round of the championship, following off of what was a fantastic season opener. You see for the 120, Simard using the, I believe, their alternative layout. I believe that is the one used over on MotoGP down through Kamsa Corner. We'll get into the specifics on the calendar and the track tour, as well as qualifying predictions on the run in towards qualifying today. We see, though, at the end of free practice, the 120 satisfied as it stands then for 7th among a block of Chevrolets just into that 3rd and 4th row of the grid right now. The 46 across the line a moment ago. Adrian Zavala goes division 2nd in the semi-pros at the end of free practice. So hopeful signs here for Mercedes, who have a 1-2-3 in the semi-pros heading in towards qualifying today. Number 42 is nearest, and that'll be for Adam Jeffrey from Malwar Racing over in the semi-pro division. He'll make the last driver down towards the line if it's not the 21 from behind him. Down to the line he goes. So heading in towards qualifying. And so, qualifying officially underway, and the first category to make their way out will be the AM drivers then, the bottom end of the grid, as we currently find to be the case. Looking here, is about 10 drivers in the AM category set to come out and play today. Leading that charge on his recent transfer to Alpine is Brandon Carr. Last season saw Alpine used more prolifically by Anthony Villorio on his transfer away from Porsche and McLaren. Turns out his campaign at Alpine was one that he reflects upon rather positively. So we'll see if that is going to be the case here for Brandon Carr. Wishful Winnings asking already in the chat there, favourite corner around Barcelona. It's a tough one here because Barcelona, it's got a few decent options. I will say one corner that I do quite like here is one coming up right now, Seat Corner, just off the exit of Repsol. Just because this area can be quite a curious one to watch, especially in those first couple of laps. It's where you'll get to see a lot of action. Very easy to see collisions down in this section as well, but it's got a very good follow through just after Repsol. When that corner becomes a little bit more parabolic, it does let the drivers get a little bit riskier down through that section of the track. Moving away from that conversation in towards the qualifying predictions as we continue to follow on board here with Brandon Carr. Now, this pertains primarily to the semi-pros and pros, the only two categories to comprise that top 10, but it still shows positive results on the horizon for Christian Lebay. Of course, didn't take the victory in round 1 of the championship, but with 2 opportunities for race wins today, there'll be plenty of foot there for the 3-time champion. He's predicted at pole with a 152.040. Behind him, George Todd in 2nd. Then Wishful Winnings 3rd. Clinton Bourne in 4th. David Tanguay in 5th. Vincent Simard in 6th. And Brandon David in 7th. You can see there 22 thousandths between the pair of them, but that pales in comparison to the 2 thousandths between David and Zavala in 7th and 8th. Dylan Vekere predicted at 9th. Fabian Yohure on his recent promotion to pro, predicted as a component of the top 10. We'll get back into that, though, when the semi-pros and pros get to come out and play for the first of our flying laps then. We're on board with Brandon Carr in the 888 Breaking Point Racing Alpine A110 for our tour here of the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. Starting things off then down towards the Elf chicane, turns 1 and 2. This sweeping S-bend section has seen quite a fair bit of trouble in Formula 1 in the last couple of years. It's been quite a chaotic section of the track, very similar in retrospect to the turn 1 and 2 complex, albeit a lot more open than the one you see over at Albert Park, Australia. Down through to, looking here, turn 4 at Repsol, having come out of Renault corner just prior at turn 3. Down towards Seat corner here at turn 5. And there's a very balanced design surrounding the circuit, the Barcelona Catalunya, which is what makes it such a attractive property for testing from across multiple different categories of motorsports, but primarily Formula One. The exit then of Earth in towards Kampsa corner here at turn 9. You see there the alternative layout used in motorcycle racing up on the left-hand side, making our way down towards La Caja. Here at turn 10, you can see the alternative layout just to the outskirts there. We're using the sharper hairpin section. Up towards turn 11, we go in towards turn 12. Rounding through towards Eurocar in a moment's time. We have this little short straight section here just before we get down onto the brakes at turn 13 at Eurocar corner in towards the RACC chicane, which if you joined us last season saw quite a controversial and now iconic incident involving Clinton Bourne, where he went head over heels from the run down through Eurocar into the RACC chicane. We only saw the second half of that one, but as it turned out, he did a full kickflip from side to side out through Catalunya corner. Brandon Carr to the line. From behind him, Didier Potvin of Maloir Racing. And as it stands to be the case then, it's the Aston Martin fastest over the Alpine by just under a second. 1:54.102, the baseline time to beat. Number 19 nearest to the line. Here comes a new driver to the field, but a driver we have seen before. Team Raceline's Thomas Romano. The number 19 Audi across the line, no time set. From behind him, the 626 starts endeavours on a flying lap. That'll be for Cedric Grenier-Massey of Let's Race Mate BMW. From behind them, approaching the line, the 315 of Ray Risti. Team Raceline Sims, one of 3 drivers they have here in the AM category, with Risti, Romano, and Mals, I believe, comprising that lineup. It actually could also be a 4th driver here. Very similar colours, though I'm not entirely certain for the case there of Matthew Shanowski. Adrian Malherbe went 3rd before him, Shanowski to 4th, Stinson to 5th, Belbray to 6th. Breaking Point Racing and Maloir Racing contending there down in the AM category. There was quite a bit of fighting between these two in Valencia. We'll see if they can follow up on that chapter. Of course, for Karina Stinson, again, continuing on her trend of unorthodox choices, it has been a confusing one to study when you consider Stinson's progress over on the Competizione Performance League World Series led to her first top 5 and later first podium. What was an exciting campaign with Aston Martin. In GT4, this has been an area where she's really been able to cut her teeth more. Started off with KTM last season on her debut to this series and now moves over to an even more bizarre choice over at Maserati. It really wouldn't cross my mind all too much if she later decided in the season to follow after season 4. Yes, as Wishful Winnings makes a bit of a pedantic argument there. Yes, it was podium in the AMS for further clarification. Yes. And for Stinson, it wouldn't really surprise me too much if next season she hopped into a Cup car, like an M2 Cup or a Porsche Cup. At the moment then, Didier Potvin fastest. Up in front of him there was Brandon Carr on track, but Carr does bring the gap down from what was 9 tenths to about 3 here, dropping 6 tenths away from that gap. Alpine still hold on to second, of course, taking a significant points penalty for the run into this round for swapping cars. Cedric Grenier-Massey of BMW, single kilo onto that M4 under BOP tonight, but he finds himself 3rd up and ahead of Adrian Malherbe for Mercedes. We see exiting Catalunya corner as we speak. In front of him there, I believe, is Ray Risti of Team Raceline Sim. Risti 9th, Malherbe to 4th. Number 15 nearby, here's Curtis Belbray. Following him, Matthew Shanowski. Belbray stays where he is, same story for Shanowski. Behind them, the number 800, here comes Stinson. And the number 800 stays in ahead of Belbray and Risti, but behind Romano and Shanowski, there for 7th in division. As we do reel in to the last 3 minutes of the AM section of qualifying, the semi-pros will get to come out and play in a moment's time. Leading the AMs at this time, then, Maloir Racing's Didier Potvin. It's worth noting, of course, when we spoke about the championship standings for the teams, Maloir Racing cover all the bases here, both pro, semi-pro, and AM. Total domination, then. Maloir Racing team has been a very, very fastly growing enterprise here. Still quite a young team, as it happens to be the case. We've seen them rise up through this series and through their endeavours over at the Competizione Performance League, which has sort of been their birthing ground here for this brand new team. We've seen them being able to go up into championships over on NLRL in the now former Console Endurance Series. In its ACC era, was able to come in for Season 2. had a decent time through there as well. Also had many drivers on the grid over on the NLRL Sunday League. Still do as it stands through the endeavours of George Todd. Continues to compete for Ferrari in Season 6 of the NLRL Sunday League, powered by TRTN. You can catch the upcoming round of the Sunday League, now returning after a week's break, heading to round 5 at Donington Park this Sunday at 6:30 p.m. British summer time. Right now, though, with a minute and a half left to go in the AM section of qualifying here at Season 4, Round 2 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, Didier Potvin for Aston Martin holds the cards at the head of the field with Brandon Carr of Breaking Point Racing Alpine in second. And Let's Race mates Cedric Grenier-Massey holds third over Adrian Malherbe and Matthew Szynoski. And behind him, the number 800, Karina Stinson recently then shifts ahead of Thomas Romano up towards 6th place, so a division top 3 row start as it stands there for Stinson. It's a powerful position to hold, even with the, as you can see, very difficult choice over at Maserati. A car that has gone the way of the dinosaur then, the Maserati Gran Turismo, at least in terms of motorsports. Maserati still does produce this prolific GT. But its time in the spotlight over in motorsports and on the tarmac here of circuits like the circuit of Barcelona, Catalunya have long since passed, and now extinct GT4. Replacing it in its motorsports endeavours is the MC20 over on the SRO GT2 regulations. We saw plenty of them on our coverage of the former TRC GT Manufacturers Cup. You can catch the archived footage available on our YouTube channel. See for Stinson is sliding away down through turn 7 as the car bucks loose there. As now we are 10 seconds out from the release of the semi-pros. We do see queuing upon the exit here. We see recently having been dropped down to this division is Isaac McMillan. So now with the semi-pros released onto the track, we see getting a raring start to things there. That's Aiden Christie, the number 32, who took victories in division last season at the circuit Paul Ricard. So at the end of the AM section of qualifying, it looks to be the case for Potvin to hold the cards at the head of the field. Now back into the pit lane, Brandon Carr still on his last lap here, has the opportunity to challenge. Nearest will be Adrian Malherbe to the line to finish off his section of qualifying. Across the line he goes to an improvement, but stays in division 4th. Number 800, we saw this was definitely quite the rodeo of a lap here for the Maserati of Karina Stinson down through the Catalunya corner. Will there be the grounds for an improvement? I'd say unlikely, but we'll remain open to options here across the line. And as it would rather be expected then, as things have been a rather difficult lap following on with that Maserati there, stays in 6th. Joining us in chat there, we can see both Wishful Winnings and Justin Benton. Of course, both components of the Pro division, which we'll see in about 8 minutes' time, just under 9 minutes as it happens to be the case. Let's go to catch on board, though, with the leading cars, as I am told there is trouble for the Audi of... looking there was definitely trouble for the Audi. But was it for the Audi, actually? Sorry. The 32 did run into... It was a very sudden bit of trouble down there. I am not even clear now if it was the Audi. I mean, it goes to show the recording this late at night is starting to have quite a adverse effect on one's mind. But we wouldn't miss it for the world here on this series. Of course, now our 4th season of coverage here on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. We've seen it every step of the way down through the RACC chicane, then on board with Aiden Christie. The Audi R8, which we discussed not too long ago on some of our previous broadcasts, will now see a spiritual successor in the automotive world. The Audi Nuvolari will release to fill in the void left behind by the R8 after its recent discontinuation. Making our way down through turns 1 and 2 here at the Elf Chicane. The number 32 starts the first of our semi-pro flying laps in qualifying. Now, bringing back up those qualifying predictions, it does pertain to the fate of one of those semi-pros, that being Adrian Zavala. We would see a possible top 10 outright here, with times expected in the range of a 1:53.079. That's only 0.02 up and away from Brandon David in 7th. And that represents one of the, if not closest, margins of that top 10 heading in towards tonight's qualifying. So keeping an eye then out for Zavala over the course of the session at large here. The number 46 Mercedes, one to watch in qualifying, and that would, by looks of things, then place him on a division pole up and ahead of the likes of drivers such as Peacock, Sanchez, Christie, and the list goes on, and the recently relegated McMillan. Taking a look then, as we now do get the final standing of results there from the AM section of qualifying. Didier Potvin on division pole, Carr second, Grenier Massey in third, Malherbe fourth, Shanovsky in fifth, Stinson in sixth, Romano seventh, Mals in eighth, Belvray ninth, and Risti rounds out the AM division top 10. Now we'll get to see how that merges in with the arrival of the number 32 here, the Audi of Aiden Christie. We saw some brilliant fighting from this Audi over in Paul Ricard at the season finale of the HCCL multi-class last weekend. It was a fantastic spectacle to see. He was fighting along with Marek Klopsch, making his way to the line then for the first of his flying laps. Goes division, actually overall third, I should say, on that division pole. From behind him, the number 27 approaches the line. Brad Peacock of Breaking Point Racing goes onto division pole. Then following him was Adam Jeffrey, now overall pole. Then Adrian Zavala. 153.640 for the number 46 Mercedes. From behind approaches the 616. The number 61 also crossed the line, but no time set. The 616 of Veldkamp following him, the 59. And across the line for both of them was no time set for neither the 616 or the 59. Joey Fisher in that trailing car of two. The 999 nearest to the line. And across the line went the Jackal. Now to 9th place overall. Division... almost said Division 5th there. That's now Division 6th. Chili Peppers, recent signing to Breaking Point Racing, now 4th overall. Division 3rd. Potvin up in front of him. Car out behind. Zavala heads up the semi-pros. Halfway through their session here in Barcelona. So far been an exciting session for Mercedes here in the semi-pro category. Ruben Pereira goes 6th across the line. The number 8 Mercedes, now Division 4th. Nearest is the number 91, so going to catch on here, Ivan Sanchez from Holkianos Motorsports. Was a race a lot closer to home here for the Holkianos team in Valencia, but this could still have quite the effect on them today. Another homely race. I'd say less homely than the last one, as they're much more local to the region of Valencia than they are to Catalonia. That's what I've been told, at least in the past, from some of the drivers at Holkianos. Sanchez, though, no time set across the line, so he still has plenty of time here, about 4.5 minutes in their section of quali today. Nearest to the line, though, is going to be that number 32, down through the RACC chicane. Aiden Christie, down through the Catalonia corner. Down to the line, he goes from 8th on the grid, goes 4th, so that's now Division 3rd for him, following in his wake the number 27. We saw quite an exuberant start to the session for Brad Peacock, but he fails to follow that up with anything further. From behind him was the number 42, Adam Jeffrey. Now, as it stands, just over half a second away from Adrian Zavala. Across the line, 153.193, your new fastest time from Mercedes. Number 616 approaches the line, so here comes Andrew Veldkamp of Malwar Racing. Let's see what he can stack in with Joey Fisher in pursuit for Veldkamp. It's 13. From behind him goes Joey Fisher. Waiting to see there the arrival of that time from Fisher. I believe that was again a dud for him. The 59 across the line, no time set. Number 24 and number 999 approaching the line. So for number 24, Chili Peppers in a Division 3rd ahead of Aiden Christie. The 999, the Jackal, stays in 12th. Now we are really scraping the top end here. 153.193 the time to beat at this time. Now when one reflects back to those qualifying predictions from Zavala, currently heading up the overall and division fields respectively, he is looking somewhere in the ballpark of the trailing half of an overall top 10 once the pros have their share. That'll be in about 3 minutes time when the top end gets released onto this track. As it stands right now, in order for him to still find himself a component of that top 10, he right now finds himself in that gap here, but if Yahore or Vekere can find improvements to their time, he could be squeezed from the top 10. That's the fears currently lingering on the mind of the number 46, Adrian Zavala, on what has been so far a sensational qualifying performance, the number 46. Nearest to the line, though, Aiden Christie. Through Catalonia corner. Audi across the line then from 5th, stay where they are. 2 minutes left to go in their section of qualifying. Number 27 approaches the line next. That's for Peacock. Behind him, the 42. Jeffrey slices the time down there from 5 attempts to 3. And that doesn't come back up in the favor of Zavala. He still holds 3 attempts worth of an advantage. The 61 of Isaac McMillan now joins the fray amongst that top 10. Number 61 now 6th. He's 6-1-6 approaching the line here. And a recent leap up to 12th for Andrew Veldkamp. And we also see in front of him then, better late than never in the story of Joey Fisher. He does find himself now 6th. I believe that was... Yes, no, that is a definitive 6th place, because there was a disconnect, but not that would have affected his position. We also see across the line not too long ago, I believe, yes, was the Jackal to join that fray there, 12th. Now tucked in behind Sanchez, Peacock, and Pereira. A minute and a half before the release of the pros onto the track. Pereira across the line goes up to 3rd, so a significant leap there for the number 8 of Ruben Pereira from Mercedes AMG. Finds himself now gearing up for a podium start in the semi-pros behind Adam Jeffrey and Adrian Zavala. 1:53, 1:93, still that elusive time to beat. A minute left to go in the semi-pro section. 10 minutes coming up on then for the release of the pros onto the track. And if he can't find a few hundredths worth of an improvement there, his chances of an overall top 10 start are in jeopardy. In the number 46. Up in front of him, though, the 27 and the 32, stepping out wide, so that may have compromised an end here for the number 46. He does peel in after turn 12. And I believe that could be... Well, he's reconsidering his options there. He's got 30 seconds, so if he is going to make a call, he's got to make one certainly quite quickly. Aiden Christie across the line still has enough time here for one more go about. The number 27 follows in his midst. Approaching the line then, Peacock. No time found an improvement there, and I believe that's the towel thrown in for the BPR number 27. As we now are 10 seconds away from the release of the pros. You can see them queuing at the pit exit. They're leading that charge out. Will be the marked man of this grid. As now, released onto the track, go the pros. As we mentioned, of course, for Wishful Winnings, it is going to be a certainly interesting round to follow up from his maiden victory in this championship. The 23 with a sizable target on his back. Once again, back into the talks of those qualifying predictions. Third and last time of this session today to final LeBay predicted at pole, Todd second, and Winnings looking at a possibility of third. It's worth noting the gap between himself and George Todd up on that first and second row, I should say, for the second and third position of the grid expected under under qualifying predictions. It is a gap currently standing in there at 35 thousandths of a second. So not an awful amount of time to deal with here. Not an awfully large span of time either. It's certainly going to be very, very close in the case of those two up on the podium positions. Bourne predicted at 4th, Tanguay 5th, Simard 6th, David in 7th. Zavala predicted at that overall 8th. We'll see, though, if he can find that by the end of this session. Dylan Becquerel in 9th. Fabian Yahure recently then promoted to the pros, looking at a top 10 start. This is certainly going to be quite an interesting change of pace here, as we do find at the end of the semi-pro third of this section, session, I should say. Adrian Zavala at pole position. The number 46 coming back into the pit lane. We saw the number 32. Let's go to catch on board, though, with the number 23 Mercedes. Of a huge ensemble of Mercedes cars available to us on today's session. Up in front of him, the 42 of Jeffrey and the number 46 of Zavala, the two leading GT4s in semi-pro. As it happens to be the case, then Zavala peels in. Same story for Jeffrey. So Wishful Winnings will be our maiden drive here in the pro category for qualifying. On board with the 23, and this is the top level. In a recent survey of the 25 fastest times under BOP here at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya for GT4, 11 of which came up from drivers participating in this championship, 3 of which, if I go and grab the data, are drivers on tonight's grid. It's a staggering thing to consider. LeBay, Todd, and Winnings stand as the 3 fastest drivers on console under BOP in GT4 at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. We are talking world record territory from these 3 tonight. So do expect quite the qualifying shootout, especially when one considers Todd and Winnings' gap of 35 thousandths of a second for control of that second place spot. What looks almost undisputed, though, is a 152.040 by Christian LeBay. Of course, 3-time GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series champion, and sets his sights on a return to leading form after missing out in Valencia. The one currently holding that lead of the pro standings is this one here, Wishful Winnings, on his way out through Kamsa Corner in towards Lakaja here at turn 10. The number 23 still holds strong on his first qualifying lap in round 2 of the championship. Taking a look before we get towards the end of this session, as we did mention we'd be speaking about it, is a look at the calendar. Better late than never on the discussions here on our second and last visit to Spain before we take a trip across away from Europe in towards Africa, as we head to South Africa at the home of the former South African Grand Prix for round 3 of the championship, the first triple sprint of the season at the Grand Prix Circuit Kyalami. We'll speak more on the calendar a little later on, as we're about to see the first of those times reel in from Wishful Winnings, the first of our pros towards the line. So time to beat 153.193 and across the line. No time set there from that of Wishful Winnings. It's the 119 that'll see the line next, and Christian LeBay 152.142. Vincent Simard now to third, following in his midst then the number 12 of George Todd and the number 21 from behind him. I believe that to be approaching the line was the number 21. I believe that is Justin Benton. Yes, that is the number 21 there. Of course, recently crowned the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup Pro Division champion. We spoke about that in Valencia. Was subject to quite a nasty incident off the exit of turns 10 and 11 at Valencia 2 weeks ago at the start of this season, but Benton picks himself up by his bootstraps, back into action with Mercedes. Recently then, George Todd to second, Simard to fourth. We see Martel, Cecil and Yahure 7th through 9th overall. They stand division 4th, 5th and 6th. For Yahure, it's a bit of teething issues here as he beds into the pro category. Of course, took what was by technicality a win in the semi-pros at round 1, but saw his result changed when he shifted up towards the pros under those roster changes, of which I'm told there'll be no further changes now. At least for the drivers still on this grid. New drivers may still find themselves subject to those changes, but I'm told that of the existing drivers on this grid, there will be no further updates to those current classifications, as it is a little bit complicated to deal with on the championship charts. It does make things a little bit muddled, which is why it was such a confusing read for us to see those dramatic changes, especially across semi-pro and pro. Wishful Winnings back down towards the line here. Number 23 missed out on his first chance to set those laps in. We'll see on his second go around whereabouts he positions himself, puts himself in second. LeBay to the line, 152, I should say, 142 to beat. And that stays currently the fastest time. Number 120 across the line. Simard in 6th. Number 21 approaching the line. So we're about to see here for Justin Benton. From behind him, one of the Malwar Racing Chevrolets, I believe, yes, that was the number 99 of Carl Martel, who recently we saw there shifted up to 7th. Benton now 10th. 161. As it appears to be the case, yes, that's Dylan Vekere. Across the line there to 6th. Number 6 and number 5 across the line. In the case of the number 6, sadly, no time set, but in the case of the number 5, Richard Cecil, now in 8th. You see there a huge pack of cars re-emerging back onto the track. Among them is that 119. I believe right behind him, yes, is the number 23. So your warring duo at the head of qualifying, at the head of the Pro Championship standings as well. The 3-time defending champion and the newly emerging championship challenger. We see for Winnings his run away from Season 3 into Season 4. He's really been able to wake up out of his slumber, and Valencia was a perfect example of that, where he commanded the grid to his first ever victory in this championship and in this series. One that he was elated by in Valencia. Can he keep the ball rolling in his Spanish campaign at the start of the season, or will he have to wait for greater prospects across multiple continents over this championship? Of course, we'll be seeing racing over the course of this season in Oceania, Europe, North America, and Africa. See then the 119 and the 23 exchanging places. Nearest to the line is the number 12 of George Todd. We've seen his recent campaigns in GT3 racing over on his return to the NLRL Sunday League grid with Ferrari. Back in the saddle though with GT4 here with Mercedes, down to the line from 3rd. Finds himself staying in that position here as time does draw in for these pro drivers. They've had the same 10 minutes as everyone else, but this one is ticked by just a little bit quicker, I imagine, for them here. now having burnt through 8 of their available 10 minutes. Number 21 nearest the line from Benton stays in 12th there. As we are noting, for many drivers, quite a few frustrating troubles here in Barcelona. Not a particularly favourite track of any one driver here, but for Chevrolet, their fortunes do look to be shifting after what was dismal performance for them, according to their drivers in Valencia. Really quite a downturn for the dominant manufacturer that has played a heavy role in the last 3 seasons here on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, has been the poster child of this championship, the Camaro GT4R. And it was really quite uncharacteristic for them in Valencia, but it really seems to be a case where they're back on their feet. They find themselves with division podiums in the semi-pros at the moment, courtesy of Adam Jeffrey of Malwar Racing, 10th overall, but division 2nd. LeBay, of course, standing at the head of the field, 152, 142, that currently impenetrable time. Number 16 across the line, Brandon David. A championship challenger, we once labelled him as. Finds himself currently in 4th as part of a Mercedes 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 across both categories at the head of the field there, pro and semi-pro. Nearest the number 30, so we'll go to catch on board here. As it appears to be the case, no time set at the moment, but now we see those fortunes change from 30th, goes 14th for David Tangray in the number 30. Unfortunate news then from Team Raceline that announces that Casey Malles will no longer be participating in this championship after tonight's round due to real-world conflicts in his schedule. Unfortunate then, of course, Malles has been a frequent visitor of this championship in the last couple of seasons. It'll be unfortunate to know there will be one car down on the run-in towards Kyalami next week. So on his swan song drive, we could be seeing some rather interesting action of that number 96 in his last 2 available races. And this time here, the foreseeable future. As we come towards the end of qualifying then, I believe about to be beaten by the bell. In front of him was the number 6, Clinton Bourne, to 13th, but Wishful Winnings to the line stays in 2nd. So that pole position looking rather secure here for Christian LeBay. Let's see if he puts any faster a time onto it. 152, 142 to beat across the line will stay that fastest time for him. The 120 approaches the line from behind. 7th at the moment for Simard. And as he hits the line there, what was a 3,000th of a second gap to thwart. Couldn't find a single thousandth over it. Stays in 7th behind Dylan Vecare. Number 16 is nearest the line. We see here for Brandon David of Mercedes AMG. What can he make of it here? Needs about 4 tenths on Todd across the line. Did find an improvement, but it wasn't by anywhere near enough to see that 3rd place spot. He hangs around on the 2nd row of the grid at the end of qualifying today. Nearest is the number 30, who we recently saw shift from 30th to 14th on the grid, kicking up over the RACC chicane. Let's hope that that doesn't happen too extremely again over the next 2 races to follow. The end of qualifying then across the line then, David Tangray stays in 14th place here in Barcelona. Nearest to the line at this time, I believe, having just withdrawn to the pits, was the 21. So it actually happens to be the case of, I believe, the 28. That'll be Fabian Yahure. It was a Hail Mary signing last season for Yahure to move over to Breaking Point Racing. It was the kind of signing they needed back in Season 3. They'll be looking to keep the ball rolling in towards Season 4. Of course, 3 different teams' championships to fight for. 6 championships in total across both drivers and teams. Across the line, though, reluctantly to P15 after invalidating on Catalunya corner. Yahure in 15th. So the end of qualifying, let's get a glance in towards our pole sitters by category. In the pros, we find Christian LeBay. In the semi-pros, we find Adrian Zavala. And in the AMs, we find Didier Potvin. Taking a look in towards the regulations once again as we come away from 13 minutes of qualifying here, heading up in towards race 1 of 2. 2 40-minute races then stacked in tandem. No mandatory pit stops to be expected, then 40 minutes of racing to follow as we head in towards race 1. And so before we get a look in towards this grid, an expansive grid as it is, following in after round 1 of the championship in our previous visit to Spain over at the Circuit Ricardo Tormo in Valencia, let's take a look into the news and spoilers ahead for those of you who have yet to see the results of the 2026 24 Hours of Le Mans or the Barcelona Catalunya Grand Prix. With that being said, getting into the discussions on the World Endurance Championship, the first article of news, then Toyota wins the 2026 24 Hours of Le Mans with their brand new TR010. The recent Evo, or sort of revamp upgrades to the fated GR010, Toyota's brand new hypercar, as it would be, wins on its first ever season at Le Mans. Following in the lines then followed from the last 3 seasons in a row from Ferrari's entry of the 499p that went 3 on the trot at Le Mans across both their factory team and their privateers over at AF Corsa. It's a fantastic performance for them in GT3. I believe it was the Corvette that took victory at Le Mans. A fantastic result then. Chevrolet really reveling in victories across both IMSA and WEC in the last couple of months, also seeing wins at their home race over in Detroit alongside Cadillac in the IMSA Sports Car Championship. We spoke about that not too long ago. Taking a look in towards Formula One, and of course it would be very difficult to miss this article of news. Lewis Hamilton wins in Barcelona, the first ever Formula One Barcelona Catalunya Grand Prix, the recent rebrand then of the former Spanish Grand Prix, which has now been shifted over to the Madrid for 2026, sees Lewis Hamilton take his first Grand Prix victory on his move to Ferrari. Of course, did take a sprint victory in China last season, but for Hamilton, this really stands as much more the achievement here, an overall Grand Prix win, much to the dismay of Mercedes-AMG, who had before that point seen multiple victories in succession, courtesy of Andrea Kimi Antonelli. A fantastic moment then for Ferrari, finally seeing some upturn this season after what has been a troubling start for multiple manufacturers in the 2026 regulations. It has been a very controversial chapter thus far of Formula One, one that has been dominated so far by Mercedes, now sees a new manufacturer step into the ring with Ferrari. Taking a look then onto the grid with 2 minutes left to go before the start of race 1 today here at round 2 of season 4 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. It's Christian Lebay on pole position alongside Wishful Winnings in second, George Todd in third, and Brandon David in fourth. Adrian Zavala heads up the semi-pro field on division pole, but 5th overall to round out our top 5. Dylan Vekere in 6th, with Vincent Simard in 7th, Carl Martel in 8th, and Richard Cecil in 9th. Rounding out the top 10 is Adam Jeffrey of Malwar Racing. Down in the semi-pros, he's on the podium alongside Ruben Pereira in an overall 11th. He makes division 3rd. Behind them, Justin Benton in 12th, with Clinton Bourne in 13th, David Tanguay in 14th, and Fabian Johore in 15th. Heading up the AM field then for Malwar Racing in the number 35 Aston Martin, 16th overall on the grid, but a division pole for Didier Potvin, 16th as it stands right now, rounding out that 8th row, and then onto the 9th row behind, we find Chili Peppers and Aidan Christie. Rounding out the top 20 then on that 10th row of the field, we find Joey Fisher and Isaac McMillan. McMillan on his recent relegation from the pros in towards the semi-pros for round 2 of the championship. Brandon Carr, his recent move over towards Alpine, finds himself several points down in the standings, but now finds himself on a division 2nd in the AMS, starting in overall 21st, up and ahead of the Jackal in 22nd, Sanchez in 23rd, Peacock in 24th, and Grenier Massey rounds out the top 25. Velkamp in 26th, Malob 27th, Shanosky in 28th, Stinson in 29th, and Romano rounds out the top 30. Mal's in 31st, Belbray in 32nd, and Ray Risty in 33rd to round out a 33-car grid.
30 seconds.
And that was perfectly timed up then to the 30-second warning. We're on board with Christian Lebay for the start of the formation lap here for race 1 of 2 at round 2 of season 4. Our first trip back to Barcelona since the fated incident in season 3 that saw Clinton Bourne head over heels at the RACC chicane. Was that, I believe, yes, there was a disconnect on that front row for, yes, it was for Wishful Winnings. That's horrific timing for the number 23 after what was an ecstatic qualifying session that placed him on the front row. It put him in the best seat in the house to compete with Lebay to try and maintain his lead of the championship, has been sundered by connection troubles. That does open the door up here for George Todd. We've seen him to be a very tough customer on the race starts here in GT4. We have been given information surrounding now the 23, I believe, is into the pit lanes now as we speak. Lebay heads up the field for race 1 of 2. We'll do it for both grids. Of course, that's what the qualifying session was there to dictate. That is gut-wrenching for the 23. Starts down what is now effectively 36th position according to the game there, but we'll start from the pit lane for race 1 of 2. That does stack things up a little bit more favorably here for drivers like George Todd and Brandon David. For Brandon David, currently unaffiliated to any of the major teams up in Pro, will find himself a lone actor in that top 5. That'll be the same story for Adrian Zavala heading up the semi-pros. There are the chances then for them to come in and have a stab at an overall race lead. We have seen it in multi-division championships before, where the drivers of the lower rungs of the pecking order will try their luck. We saw it over on the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup rather prolifically from drivers like Daz Kane in the Silvers, who took 2 overall race victories with KTM. That was up and ahead of their Premier Pro category, so never say never on the prospect of seeing that for the first time here in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Of course, still a star-studded top 3. As we see then Christian LeBay, George Todd and Brandon David, a driver who we have already seen plenty of when it comes to his proficiencies in GT4. Over on the HCCL Multi-Class Championship, came to within a hair's width of that championship title in Season 4. We wrapped that up last weekend at the Circuit Paul Ricard. And like the Circuit Paul Ricard, the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya is one of mixed opinion amongst fans. Not really sure quite exactly where it sits on fan opinion between love or hate. This is still a nonetheless challenging venue to follow up from Valencia, and it's going to put the drivers through their paces here for both races involved in today's round. The first of the double sprints, now the dash races as they're called under the new regulations for Season 4. Major overtaking spots then to keep an eye out for. Repsol at looking here, turn 4, Seat at turn 5. Then also worth keeping an eye for Lakaiha, and then heading up through here at turns 11, 12 and 13 up towards Eurocar as we dive down through to the RACC chicane. Any kind of snafus in that section can easily upset balance on the drivers and can open the doors up off of major overtaking opportunities. We've seen this already be a bit of an area of problems for the Chevrolets, as we saw last season, so that'll be one consideration weighing heavy on the mind of the 119, who heads up the field for both rounds, or both races, I should say, of round 2. Nonetheless, as we gear up for the start, down towards the line we head. We have these drivers here, 33 in attendance for round 2 of the championship, for race 1 in particular. 32 on track, 1 from the pit lane. Down towards the line then for Season 4, Round 2. We are green and racing here in Barcelona for the first time of 2 today. And right off the bat, Ray Risti collects on a drive-through penalty for the first race of 2 here on Season 4, Round 2 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malwa Transport. Down through to turn 1. And so far, so good on an exuberant start then for Mercedes to put immediate pressure onto Chevrolet. We see George Todd trying to get alongside with his teammate here of Christian LeBay. Meanwhile, yellow flags down the order already there for the number 30 and number 27, Brad Peacock and David Tanguay. Wishful winnings released from the pit lane. Another bit of trouble there. The number 19 now most recently on the victims list as we see, or at least try to gain an understanding of what on earth is going on further down the order. We can see spreading out the pack behind them. Looks to be some rather exciting fighting here for that of Brandon David, side by side with Dylan Vekere down through Seat corner. As we do try to get a scope on the damages then for Thomas Romano down at Elf Chicane. Was a recent casualty as we're back into green flag conditions. Heading up the field then, Christian LeBay over George Todd in second, Brandon David in a very close third away from Dylan Vekere, currently in fourth. Carl Martel rounds out the top 5, Vincent Simard in 6th. Flushed from that top 5 and top 6 entirely is Adrian Zavala in 7th. Richard Cecil in a close 8th place. Right behind him then, we see the arrival of Clinton Bourne now up over Adam Jeffrey. Jeffrey to 10th, Bourne to 9th. We see there leaping up for the inside at Lakaiha. That's the number 21 of Justin Benton looking to take a bite here out of the number 6 in towards turn 12 we go. Meanwhile, another yellow flag emerges. It's this time the number 8 in trouble, I believe here. Yes, that is the case. Number 8 was in trouble, so that pertains to Ruben Pereira. And it's gut-wrenching to see here. He was on a division podium before that incident erupted, and now will find himself several pegs down the order. Looking back up at the head of the field after the first lap of racing here in race 1 or 2, LeBay leads over Todd. David in 3rd. Vekere in a super close 4th to Martel right behind there in 5th. Now he's got the straight line advantage over these Mercedes cars on that opening straight section. Just a little over half a mile, I believe, here of FIA Grade 1 asphalt. So making our way down through to the Alpha Chicane here at turns 1 and 2 with the 161 stepping out wide to try and defend his position over the 99 for the last of that second row. Vecchiere, who previously put plenty of pressure onto Brandon David on that first lap, now finds the fate turned right on its head into the next. Vincent Simard now finds himself raring to go on a fight for the top 5 with his teammate Karl Martel. Behind them, Adrian Zavala still punching well above his weight, surrounded on all sides then by Pro Division drivers. The semi-pro number 46, sandwiched in between Maloir Racing's Vincent Simard and Richard Cecil. Behind them, that's trouble for Clinton Bourne, and we do see the yellow flags are out as Bourne is facing the wrong way. Justin Benton along with him there, so it looks to be an incident involving multiple drivers. We also see collected in the mix there was the Jackal and Isaac McMillan. McMillan now looking to pressure Justin Benton as we get out through Sayat corner. In towards Worth we go at turn 7. Recent calamity then down at turn 5. I've got to say, it's not looking grand here for some of these drivers. This has been an already very challenging start to the race. We do see from behind, looks to be quite a fair deal of damage, but for whom exactly? I believe we do have a, well, looks to be very damaged Maloir Racing Chevrolet. It's the 616 there. We're looking at the Chevrolet of Andrew Veldkamp in trouble. Now down to 19th in this race. Looking back up through the order, David Vivekere still well on the cards. Behind them, Karl Martel rounds out that top 5. Simard in 6th, Zavala in 7th, and Cecil in 8th. We can see of that top 10 is held between 2 manufacturers exclusively here then is Mercedes and Chevrolet. Just outside of that top 10 at the moment, Audi tries to vie their chances up here. Now, this is worth noting. Jeffrey V. Christie is a current division 2nd place fight between the 32 and the 42, heading up towards turn 1. Audi versus Chevrolet. Behind them, Joey Fisher in a division 4th. Behind them, rounding out the division top 5 of the semi-pros is Chili Peppers of Breaking Point Racing. The Aston Martin looking rather spry through turns 1 and 2. Now through to turn 3 at Renault corner. Very easy to wash out wide in this section. This does open the doors up down towards Repsol for possible overtakes. And that follows up into this section here down through to Sayat corner. Zavala unable to find any ground. We do see, though, for the fight of that division 2nd, Jeffrey V. Christie down through to Sayat. Very close behind then Joey Fisher and Chili Peppers. Behind them, Brandon Carr heads up the lead of AM up over Cedric Grenier-Massey. Behind them, Didier Potvin, who looks to be now getting overtaken by Justin Benson. So recent dismays for Potvin. It is worth noting also for the Aston Martin did stand at a division pole for the start of race 1. Now finds himself at the back of its podium as Isaac McMillan looks to get up and alongside in towards Kamsa corner. McMillan hounding the rear left quarter, I should say, of the Aston Martin of Didier Potvin, heading up towards Lakaiha. Later onto the brakes of 2. The number 61 could run deep here. He does leave the door open, but also running wide went the number 35. Sneaking onto his rear quarter now is Andrew Veldkamp, and it is worth considering Veldkamp still has damage after an early incident in today's race. Right behind him, though, is the Jackal. This does pertain to a division fight as well. Right now, it's fighting overall for 19th place. Getting a look back up the order to see a 5-car split here for a fight on 4th place. Vecchiere defending away from Martel, Simard, Zavala, Cecil, and I believe not too far away from them is Fabian Yohure. Dylan Vecchiere versus Karl Martel then next on the cards. We've got to try and catch on board with any of our fighters in and amongst the fray. You see for Vincent Simard, he's caught between a rock and a hard place. Up in front of him, he's tantalizingly close to that fight on 4th place, but he's got to hold off Adrian Zavala and Richard Cecil for his chances to maintain a 6th place spot on this track. Meanwhile, the number 12 hemorrhages distance from the 119 at the head of the field as we head in past the first 10 minutes of racing. Currently 6.5 minutes through on race 1. Following on board with Vincent Simard for a moment's time here. Looking to possibly contest 5th place, but he's also got to consider his own position defending 6th away from the approaching 46. The David to their proverbial Goliath. Adrian Zavala punching well above his weight in tonight's round of the championship as he finds himself a semi-pro driver in the land of the Giants here in Pro. Past Kamsa in towards Lakaiha. We do see the fortunes start to shift here for Simard, going back into that fight for 5th, right up to the rear bumper now of his teammate Karl Martel, who is in turn looking to get closer to Dylan Vecchiere, eclipsed there by the monstrously large chassis of the Chevrolet. I believe here the largest car on that GT4 grid And you really get to see that demonstrated proper if we get to see once again Brandon Carr fight with any of these Chevrolets as one of the smallest cars in that grid with Alpine. Vincent Simard still in hot pursuit, and I believe this could escalate to him being part of that fight up ahead for 4th place, with Dylan Vekere now finding himself at the mercy of the Chevrolet behind him. The 99 emerges to his left-hand side, so he's going to go try and run the long distance in towards turns 1 and 2. Now, this solely depends on how daring does Vekere want to be onto brakes. Very late onto the brakes, but he holds it, so valiant defensive 4th by Dylan Vekere. Watching for the point of view of Vincent Simard, he's now a 3rd party in this fight, and not too far away from him is Zavala and Cecil for 4th and 5th parties in this fight for 4th place. So far, though, we are looking at this fight for 5th amongst teammates. Bear in mind, as far as teammate fights go, historically speaking, Barcelona's not been the greatest of venues for it. Just ask Mercedes in 2016. Side by side, now looking to be ahead on the run down towards Seat. Simard might have the cards here, up over Martel. And that he does, sneaking on around the outside goes Zavala. But does he have the speed to carry out from turn 5? Through turn 6, it looks to be Martel's position to have in towards turn 7 as we begin to run back uphill. Meanwhile, all of this chicanery has allowed for a gap to form up now with Vekere 0.7 of a second in the lead of this fight for 4th. As now escaping that fight for 5th goes Vincent Simard. Looking to get a glance in, though, with Karl Martel, who finds himself now suddenly thrust into a very tense situation. The 99 finds himself at the mercy of Adrian Zavala behind and is struggling to recuperate on his losses, just having fell from the top 5 of this race. 10 minutes through here on race 1 of 2, and I am given information pertaining to a possible approach for the lead between the 12 and the 119. Getting a look in here, though, Labay leads 1.2 seconds over George Todd, with Brandon David in 3rd. Dylan Vekere, we see there, rocketing down through the RACC chicane in 4th. Behind him, Vincent Simard, recently up to 5th. Karl Martel to 6th, and Adrian Zavala in 7th. Richard Cecil looking for his chances of 7th place there. You can see the number 5 has been very consistently along with him over the last couple of laps here. Fabian Yahure makes 9th. Rounding out the top 10, Aidan Christie on Division 2nd in the semi-pros. Joey Fisher in Division 3rd for the semi-pros, 11th overall. And Adam Jeffrey currently Division 4th and overall 12th. Justin Benton makes that now 13th as Benton goes to 12th. You see recent troubles here for Cedric Grenier-Massey in his efforts to try and fight along with the Alpine of Brandon Carr. Finds himself comfortably up the order as we do. Oh, was that trouble there for McMillan? Yes, I believe it was. That does open the doors up here for Cedric Grenier-Massey to see up to 16th place here in the 626 BMW. Right behind him is Didier Potvin fighting for that Division 2nd in the AM category. Behind them looks to be looking there. That is, yes, David Tanguay and Andrew Velkamp. 2 damaged Maloir Racing Chevrolets, one in a much worse state of repair than the other. Behind them, the Jackal rounding out that top 20. Wishful Winnings having that heartbreaking start to this race. He was projected on 2nd. He was on that front row before his disconnect. He has made a valiant return to form, though. It is worth considering here now 21st. What was a 33-car grid. Not too shabby, all things considered. Vincent Simard, we look to go and catch back on board with here as he does approach ever closer to the prospect of fighting for position up the road. We do see here for the 99, there is trouble up in front. That is for the 35 there, Didier Potvin. Now hemorrhages ground to Cedric Grenier-Massey. We're watching here from the Jackal, who is caught between 3 different categories, squeezing their way through turn 9. Wishful Winnings, now in amongst the top 20, is looking to hound for position off here of the Jackal. And going for the inside down at Lakaiha, carving his way through the crowd here. Going to catch on board with that 120 as we are seeing the formation of the fight for 4th place for that of Vincent Simard. And taking that position off of the Mercedes is one thing, trying to hold on to it is another, especially as we've seen how brave on the brakes that 161 has been in previous attempts from other drivers on this track. We see for Simard, he might have just been far enough ahead, but out through turn 2 into turn 3, he'll be to the outside into Renault corner, so Vekere is going to hold his ground as we go slightly uphill here around this long sweeping right-hander. The 120 now looking for the inside in towards Repsol corner. The 161's out a little bit wide here. The door is open, but it's closing fast. We see the 161's got this one lined up here to hold the inside, goes a little earlier onto the brakes just to make this as awkward as possible for Simard. Actually backs him up into Martel, so playing things very tactically. The Mercedes knows in the straights it is a sitting duck against these Chevrolets, so he's got to play for those corners. He's got to play for combat basically here to hold that 4th place spot away from the Chevys, because in the straight there is no hope to be found. It is going to be purely the difference in mentality around the brakes. Who brakes latest is who wins in that overtake. And Vecre, I've got to take my hat off here for him. I'm not actually wearing a hat, but proverbially speaking, hats off to him for that defense thus far, because that has been really quite something to behold here at Barcelona. You'd think with the amount of straights available to them here, especially when coming out from turn 3 to turn 4, coming out from turn 12 to turn 13, coming down from turn 9 to turn 10, and going from turn 16 to turn 1, the amount of opportunities available for Chevrolet to just soar on past, you wouldn't expect Mercedes to put on such a royal rumble of things here in towards Catalonia corner, so giving it another shot. So we do take note of the fact McMillan now returning to the field, but he is in the pit lane after that disconnect. Also in the pits is Matthew Shanowski. Simard gaining, and he is to the inside this time around with a 161. We've seen how late onto the brakes he wants to take it in towards turn 1. He is out wide. To the outside will be the 120, so the roles reversed off of that last lap, and this time around the 161 failed to capitalise. We'll see though, as I'd say this is far from done in that fight for 4th place. Simard now gaining the position off of Dylan Vecre, heading up towards Repsol corner. The Mercedes peers over the Chevrolet's shoulder, just having a glimpse in towards the apex of turn 4, now heading from turn 4 to turn 5 in towards Seat. Behind them is Karl Martel. We saw the Mercedes did think about it there, but the gap was just a little too small. Brilliant fighting nonetheless. If we got to catch on board, if possible, here with the 99, so we do just quickly get a glimpse of the fighting here between Cedric Grenier-Massey, Clinton Bourne, and the Jackal. That's all 3 categories currently fighting for 17th place. We want to go and catch on board here with Karl Martel, who recently steps into frame. Sees there in front of him a bit of a step out at turn 9 for Dylan Vecre. Now he mustn't get too blinded by the opportunity to enter that top 5, because right behind him is a very capable driver in every respect. That's Richard Cecil. From behind him as well is a recently down to 8th place Adrian Zavala. We've just got word there from Wishful Winnings, another disconnect on that number 23. There are some concerns, of course, surrounding server stability that ultimately waylaid our chances to see last week proceed on schedule. That's why we're now actually a week late into it after readjustments from last week's broadcast. Ultimately was red flagged before the first ever race here at Barca this season. Oh, from behind there as well. That was another driver, I think. That was, yes, that was Zavala. That was Zavala we just saw. Disconnect as well. Now, there definitely are some concerns afoot here. See up in front of them, Vincent Simard drops back onto the nose of Dylan Vecre. That creates a bit of a concertina between these 3 at this time. Behind them, Richard Cecil. Taking a look onto that grid at the moment, it's been nearly halfway through this race. There have been quite a few dismays when it comes to those divisions, especially for that recent disconnect for Adrian Zavala, because that tips the scales in the favour of Aidan Christie, looking for his first division win since Paul Ricard last season on his debut to the AMS. Joey Fisher now finds himself thrust into the chances to lead in division here in race 1 of 2. Behind them, we're seeing the fight for the podium between Adam Jeffrey and Chili Peppers of Chevrolet and Aston Martin. Leading in the AMS then is Brandon Carr for Alpine, against all odds when one considers he's multiple points down for that choice after swapping manufacturers after round 1, and he also finds himself the heaviest in class under BOP today. No one would have expected Alpine to perform as they have. Brandon Carr has delivered on an exceptional drive in the first half here on race 1. Looking back up through the order, Vecre v Simard back into full contention here for that 4th place spot. Things have gone quiet on the podium at the head of the field, but things are more than lively in the top 5. Running out wide at the start of the RACC chicane, looking for his in there, but couldn't find anything. We do find then 5 cars squeezing in for that fight on 4th place. Simon, Vekere, Martel, Cecil and Yahure all fighting for the same post. Most recent chapter of it could be an overtaking of that top 5 for Carl Martel. He's up and alongside Dylan Vekere. Down the opening straight in towards turns 1 and 2 we go. As we edge ever closer to the halfway mark on race 1, from around the outside goes the number 99. The 161 holds the ground from the inside, then to the outside, then back to the inside. That's valiant defense there. Textbook from Dylan Vekere. Behind him, we see emerging now closer to that top 6 spot. Richard Cecil sets his sights upon Carl Martel. Fabian Yahure from behind in the number 28, having carved his way up through the field. Finds himself in and amongst it. That's the number 61 from behind, actually, I should say there. So about 4.9 seconds away is Fabian Yahure. One we're seeing behind us there, that's Isaac McMillan, I believe. Yes, in 30 seconds, so that's a bit embarrassing. We had him mixed up with this one here. You can see where the confusions may stem from, because we're not looking for the accent colours, we're looking for the base colour. That's still silver. Meanwhile, in the talks of semi-pro, Joey Fisher versus Aiden Christie, the new fight on the table for that lead. Behind them, fighting on the podium between Jeffrey and Peppers for that 3rd place, overall 12th. That recent misfortune, though, for Adrian Zavala. He is back out on track, but he's 2 laps down here in race 1. That is heartbreak. There's multiple drivers suffering disconnects here in round 2 of the championship. Not the kind of problems you want to see so early on in the season, and certainly not after last week. For those perhaps out of the loop, this round was originally meant to run last week, but was red flagged after multiple disconnects. We fully lost the server during the course of free practice, so it was rather devastating to see then. Not a great deal they can do when it comes to server stability as well, because a lot of it does depend, especially for the North American servers, on the weather, rather curiously enough, as the weather can be rather extreme and not particularly kind to the server tech. Side by side then the 161 and the 99. Martel runs wide into turn 1, forced onto the runoff, now over the sausage curbs as he rejoins up in front of Richard Cecil, who now sets his sights on the opportunity for a chance to see the top 6. Behind him, Fabian Yahure, not Fabian Yahure, sorry, that's again the unlapping number 61 of Isaac McMillan. In a perfect world, that would be the 28. Sadly, though, 4.2 seconds out. Now, I should point this out. That previous interval was 4.9, so he's up 7 tenths.
We are halfway through. Keep pushing.
So ignore the silver car behind Richard Cecil. He's down in 32nd. That's not actually part of this fight here, but he is. Front row tickets to it. Richard Cecil still vying his chances of a top 6 by the end of race 1. Now getting a glimpse back in towards the semi-pros that have, in the absence of action up at the front end of pros, stolen away the show here. Joey Fisher versus Aiden Christie. Certainly one crossing our minds multiple times today. We do get to see here, just quickly, a fight between Tanguay and Bourne. Both pro drivers waylaid from the top 10 after calamity at the start of race 1 of 2 today, here in round 2 of the championship. Now find themselves pressed together down through turn 9. Behind them, the leader of the AM category, Brandon Carr for Alpine and Breaking Point Racing. Not too far away at all. Side by side here with Belbray and Zavala, but 2 separate lengths of the race between them 2. As we cut away from the Chevrolets, we do want to get a glimpse in with that fight for the lead. Now 0.7 of a second between Christie and Fisher. Audi on somewhat of a renaissance here on ACC. We've seen its popularity surge once more in the last couple of weeks to last couple of months across both GT4 and GT3. One of the more prolific uses we've seen for the R8 outside of Christie's performance here in GT4 has also been for another GT4 driver, Marek Klopsch, down in the HCCL Multi-Class Championship. We've also seen up in GT3, however, the recent adoption of the R8 LMS Evo 2 by Season 5 Rookies Division Champion of the NLRL Sunday League, Carlos Disch. And that recent switch from Ford to Audi has still proven the Swiss talent many good over the course of Season 6 thus far. And as mentioned before, you'll be able to catch the next round of the 6th season of the NLRL Sunday League, powered by TRTN, this Sunday at 6:30 p.m. BST. We go live from Donington Park. Meanwhile, then, as we continue to watch on board with the fight for the semi-pro lead, Christie starts to forge open a gap here. What was, as we caught on with them, 7/10, now advances double to that distance, just over 1.5 seconds as they cross through Campsa Corner. Now, getting a look back in with a previous fight we saw not too long ago as it would happen. We do note there, troubles emerging for the number 35 drive-through penalty for Didier Potvin. He's currently tucked up behind this one here, Andrew Veldkamp. But where we want to go and set our sights upon, as we do note, once again, a new chapter of fighting between these two. This is what was covertly going on in the background through Valencia. Now we get to see its latest chapter in the Stinson v Belbray saga for 25th between Maserati and Chevrolet. Now we actually want to go and take a look in here. Was one fight that we found way outside of that top 10, but was razor thin in our last encounters with them. Now having shifted on its head, Clinton Bourne versus David Tanguay. Brandon Carr right in behind them with Alpine. As we cross in then closer to the last 15 minutes of racing, 16.5 before the end of race 1 of 2. LeBay continues to lead, now 2.3 seconds up over George Todd in second, Brandon David in third, with Vincent Simard in fourth, Dylan Vecchiere up into that top 5, with Carl Martel in 6th. Richard Cecil in 7th, Fabian Yahure in 8th, Justin Benton in 9th, and Aidan Christie rounds out the top 10 at the head of the semi-pro field. Behind him, Joey Fisher in 11th, Chili Peppers in 12th, Adam Jeffrey in 13th, Clinton Bourne in 14th, and David Tanguay in 15th. Leading the AM category then, we see here with Brandon Carr in 16th, up and ahead of the Jackal in 17th. Cedric Grenier-Massey in 18th, with Ruben Pereira in 19th, and Andrew Veldkamp rounds out the top 20. Ivan Sanchez 21st, Brad Peacock in 22nd. We see in the pit lane currently serving as drive-through penalty, set to drop possibly a few more positions here is Didier Potvin, now having just emerged from the pit lane in the number 35 Aston Martin. Casey Malles, as it would appear to be the case, has run into some bother on this grid here, is now back on his way out. And the number 96, of course, this is his last round of competition due to real-life scheduling changes, has now kept him from continuing to compete in this championship. It's a rather bittersweet ending, seeing how things have gone thus far today for the 96. He now drops down the order, as we now see emerging up to 25th is Thomas Romano. And we also see advancing north of their previous fight for 25th now, Stinson and Belbray. Number 5 has recently picked up a drive-through penalty. That's for Richard Cecil. That's heartbreak for him when you consider the recent procession up towards the possibility of a top 5. Meanwhile, out behind them, recent updates for the fight on Yahure v Benton, as they were razor thin down through the RACC chicane as we drop into the last 15 minutes of racing today. Got a catch on board with those Mercedes cars then, looking to find on board here. Richard Cecil will ultimately have to face the music within the next 3 laps, otherwise it will be disqualification for him. It is worth noting a few blips there on that number 5. That is deeply concerning when one considers Cecil, like many of the drivers here, are of the primary client base for this championship. He's one of the several American drivers, and as you see it there, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We'll be back in a moment. Ignore that. We haven't actually suspended the session. That's legacy code. Well, that was rather annoying. We're back on with the broadcast, however. 13.5 minutes left to go in today's session here on race 1 of 2. Season 4, Round 2 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Apologies there for the technical interruption and the brief scare when you saw on our technical difficulties page. I believe if we do just have that come back up here, it was this here. That was from last week. Don't panic over that one. That was a little bit of a snafu on our end. That session was definitely not suspended. At least not yet, as concerns continue to grow surrounding disconnects from multiple drivers now reporting in the same problem here at the end of race 1. So far then, back on board with Christian Lebay, who leads 3 seconds over George Todd. And again, where we last left off with these drivers, we saw that Richard Cecil still has to face the music on his drive-through penalty, has yet to do so. Meanwhile, taking a look back in towards the semi-pros, we do see escalation of conflict here at the head of the field between Joey Fisher and Aiden Christie. So this is one certainly worth going to catch on board with here as we scroll across the field to try and locate these two now, fighting for the division lead. Joey Fisher looking for the inside at Repsol corner. Aiden Christie's out wide, but bear in mind, he'll find himself up towards the inside, but he actually does fall himself down towards single file and now in towards second as we go in towards Sayat corner. So what I was trying to get at there was the opportunity for them to go side by side down towards Sayat. They actually find it off the exit here, back up towards turn 6 and now back in to the division lead. Christie over Fisher. But Fisher holds his ground. He's still side by side through turn 7, now up through turn 8, heading up towards turn 9. It can go any which way between Christie and Fisher at this time. It's been brilliant fighting for the semi-pro lead. They're still side by side off the exit of turn 9. It seemingly has no end in sight. It's worth considering from behind. Chili Peppers is approaching. So we now find all 3 of the podium sitters in this division contesting the lead as we drop closer to the last 10 minutes of racing here on race 1. We see in from behind Chili Peppers now challenging Joey Fisher. Let's see if we can go and catch on board with Fisher at this time. Caught between a rock and a hard place. Not an easy spot here for Fisher, as he now hemorrhages plenty of distance, runs out wide at Catalonia corner. The Aston Martin is well within range in the fight for division second in the semi-pros right now. We do find now advancing up towards a top 10 overall fight. Chili Peppers looking to go the long distance here on Joey Fisher. Down towards turn 1 we go. The number 5 clears his drive through, so that's good news for Richard Cecil. No further issues on the horizon for him. 10.5 minutes left to go here in race 1 of 2. Behind them is Adam Jeffrey, now up to 12th overall on today's grid. The 59 finds himself now met with quite serious pressure after a thwarted attempt to lead in the semi-pros. They went side by side all the way through Sector 1 into Sector 2 on the lap just gone between himself and Aiden Christie. But at the end of it all, he finds himself facing down both barrels of Aston Martin and Chevrolet behind, courtesy of the 24 and the 42 of Chili Peppers and Adam Jeffrey. Looking here as we drop into the last 10 minutes, recent updates from the fight for 5th place. Vekere v Martel, the latest on our considerations up in the pro category. The 99 still in hot pursuit of the 161. Lebay continues to lead now 3.6 seconds over George Todd. Brandon David still on the podium. The recent talking points have come from semi-pro as Aiden Christie defends his lead over Joey Fisher. Now, albeit it's one that Adrian Zavala will be rather bitter about, considering a disconnect is what ripped him out of the opportunity to lead the semi-pros into his first victory this season. Christie will be looking at his first division victory since Paul Ricard last season, when he spent his time in the AM category before the introduction of the semi-pros this season. That if he can continue to hold ground from Joey Fisher in second, Chili Peppers in third, Adam Jeffrey in fourth. Meanwhile, for the AMs, we find here Brandon Carr looking at a rather positive outlook for today's event. The AAA Alpine, a very recent addition to the field, as Carr transferred to Alpine after round 1. He's lost a significant chunk of points in his standings in the AM Championship, but he'll be getting quite a lot of it back with his performance today as he leads that division from an overall 16th place. On the podium along with him then would be Cedric Grenier-Massey and Didier Potvin, but Karina Stinson does find herself within an opportunity for another division podium. We spoke about her progress over on the World Series now that that's wrapped up, and it wrapped up a few weeks ago. But in that time in the AM category, Stinson did see multiple top 5s and even a podium in the AM division in her time with Aston Martin. We did comment earlier in this broadcast over how unorthodox the choice for Maserati has been, but there is method yet to her madness, and the number 800 stands within, as it happens to be the case here, about a second and a half at the most between herself and Didier Potvin for the chance of a division podium here in Barcelona. Actually, as I say, that's 1.4 seconds, but the chance still remains. Chili Peppers now hot in pursuit of the 59. And really putting the heat on now to the number 59, who is in turn trying to squeeze up towards the 32 of Aiden Christie. We are looking at the possibility, slim as it is right now, but one that is swiftly growing, of a top 4 fight all the way down to the checkered flag here on race 1 of 2. Aiden Christie still holds the cards for Audi Sport up over Mercedes, Aston Martin and Chevrolet. A much more varied grid in the semi-pros than what we're seeing up in the pro category right now. Actually, as it happens to be the case, there isn't a single car that is not manufactured by either Mercedes or Chevrolet in that pro division. So it is nice to see a little bit of flavour here in the semi-pros. Of course, Mercedes and Chevrolet still prominent fixtures, but then you also have the addition of, as you can see behind here, Aston Martin, and up in front you can see Audi. Looking though for Chili Peppers. This could be a rather curious one here as he continues to fight along with Joey Fisher. This is for a division second, I should point out, as he is now up and ahead. Technically speaking, it is for 10th overall on track. As we make our way down towards Repsol, out wide goes Fisher. That could be trouble for him. That does open the door up here. Adam Jeffrey. And there we go, down through towards Sayat Corner. The 59 holds the ground from the 42, but only just. To answer a question for Wishful Winnings in chat, who asked, so because I disconnected, does that mean I start for the back at race 2? I could just say yes, to be honest. There's no like character breaking involved with interacting with chat. Yes, you do. I don't. It's rather curious because you'll never get the context for this if you're watching on the YouTube release, but it was a case where he was saying, so because I disconnected, does that mean I have to start from the back on race 2? Sailor Bay if yes. And we don't really do code words here on TRTN, at least not anymore. We used to have brake failure as one of them. That's usually when a driver just ran out wide and we didn't want to hurt their ego too bad. We just said it was brake failure back in the day. Turns out that brakes, very difficult to fail on this game. Usually the pedal goes first before the actual disc or pad. Out through Catalonia Corner. Adam Jeffrey still in pursuit here of Joey Fisher. Now finds himself a reluctant P3. In the semi-pros was not too long ago on the chances to try and fight for a lead, but Aiden Christie has put up a proper stonewall defense of things here in that number 32 Audi, but he may have to face off against a new nemesis here with the recent introduction to that fight of the lead. Only 1.5 seconds in closing here in the last 5 minutes of race 1 is Chili Peppers of Breaking Point Racing Aston Martin. In terms of the nearest fights on track, we are just given a quick update there. That was, I believe, a disconnect again. We do find ourselves now down to 31 drivers. Technically speaking, 29 active, 31 overall, with 2 disconnects there, Winnings and Shinosky, among several others. Among the closest fights is Richard Cecil versus David Tanguay, the 13th overall on track. There is also further down the line Sanchez v Grenier Massey. And that, I believe, has again... no, we've seen actually a reintroduction of a driver there. So we've gone up from 31 to 32. As, yes, we do note there, Fabian Yahure was one of the disconnects. There could be some words here from race control after this race because we've seen multiple drivers been shifted out of form. And for Fabian Yahure, he was on for a fairly solid drive, all things considered. Was still looking at the possibility of a top 10 on his promotion to pro. As it stands to be the case, he's relegated from the top 15, could even be from the top 20 in its entirety. Bear in mind, it was a disconnect as well that took Adrian Zavala out of the contention for the semi-pro win here in race 1. So I'm not particularly sure what the current strategy is from race control. Of course, they were hoping this wasn't going to happen in tonight's race, but this is something they've got to face head on, I imagine. I don't think many drivers would be particularly pleased if they just kept to their guns on this one. Of course, we would like to see us get through this event. I don't really think another week's delay is on the cards here. I'd certainly hope not, because we do really want to get through to that Kyle Army round. We see Recent elevation of action here. Justin Benton is up on the inside on Karl Martel. They rub doors off the exit of Repsol, heading up towards Seat. So Benton, with his elbows out, sees the gap open and seizes the opportunity to take 6th off of Karl Martel. Benton has had to face things rough and ready before in GT2. He is no stranger to the most extreme end that the SRO GT regulations can give him. So these GT4s are child's play by comparison. So he's really able to wreak quite a bit of havoc when he's given the opportunity. We saw it right there. The 21 takes no prisoners when it comes to an overtake. The gap was open. Whether he would make contact or not was not his concern. The only concern was, could he make the move at all? The answer being yes. And now he sets his sights upon another move here with a 161 directly in his iron sights. Let's go to catch on board with Justin Benton at this time, as we do see continued fighting for that Division 3rd in semi-pro between Joey Fisher and Adam Jeffrey. More updates hopefully to follow then as we're on board now to the number 21, Justin Benton, looking to fight for 5th place. Two minutes left to go, so we are approaching the point of no return. I believe the next lap coming will be the last from Christian LeBay as he makes his way currently on track down towards turn 4. We're watching here with Justin Benton and Dylan Vekere. Vekere, who has put on, I should say, one of the best defensive performances of race 1. The only other one I could think of was Aiden Christie in semi-pro. Justin Benton, once again, spies an opportunity here from the 161, just couldn't capitalize this time around. The area right now in sector 1, I should say, turns 1, 2, and 3, a little too tight with the number 21 to find an in on the 161. His throttle management on that number 21 has been quite something as well. You can see never once is there the indication that Mercedes is struggling when he gets onto the accelerator. Making his way up towards turn 6. Now to turn 7 as immediately they're covering off the inside was the 161. You can see him almost diving to the corners. There's this real difference in driving style you can observe between Vekere and Benton at this time. Vekere has had to play a lot more elbows out in terms of defense instead of offense. Has had his tires chipped down a lot more, so he's got a lot less grip to play with. You can see he's playing things much more aggressively in towards the corners. Harder entrance. And that is affecting him on the exit here, whereas Benton's taking things nice and easy. And you can see right now that's paying off. As you heard there, leader on the final lap, so will not long from now be catching on board with Christian LeBay. But we still want answers for this fight of the top 5. Justin Benton versus Dylan Vekere. And I would like to comment as well, not too far away is still the 99 of Karl Martel. In towards the RACC chicane we go on the final lap of race 1. On that last lap we go. Benton still in hot pursuit, but of course it's the unstoppable force meets the immovable object here. 2 Mercedes cars, not one of them is going to have a direct advantage in the straights, just by staying in the slipstream being enough to keep Benton along with. But last of the late breakers once again has been Vekere. He's kept his elbows out all race long here, and it could reward him with a top 5 here in Pro. Keeping the ball rolling on a solid start to the season for Vekere in the Pro category. That 161 has played a fantastic defensive game here thus far. Number 46 is in once again more hot water. I believe that is Adrian Zavala letting on by the 35 and the 119. I believe he does want this race to be over and done with after his disconnect that has sadly ripped him away from the chances of taking his first division win of the season. Benton v Vekere, still plenty on the cards. We'll catch on with them, though, as they make their way from turn 7 up towards turn 8 and 9. Not too long away, then, is LeBay. Up towards Kamsa corner. Benton and Vekere. Off the exit of Kamsa up towards Lakaiha. We will have to catch on with them in a moment's time, as making his way down through turn 16 towards the line here. At the end of race 1, Christian LeBay takes his first win of season 4. The 3-time champion back on leading form. George Todd looking at second. Brandon David looking at third. But our real talking point comes from the fight here just past 4th place, which looks to be going to Vincent Simard. What is the current calling here for the fight on Vekere v Benton in towards the RACC chicane? It looks to be a case here where Benton has just faltered in behind. He may have left the door open a little too long here for the arrival of Carl Martel. All the way down towards the line. It'll be Dylan Vekere to see the last of the top fives in Pro. Benton, by a hair's width, holds the ground on 6th, 188 thousandths off of Carl Martel. Making his way down through the RACC chicane, the checkered flag could not have come any sooner for the number 32. What has been a very confusing race for him has now gifted him his second division win. As we see then across the line, Aidan Christie wins in semi-pro. Chili Peppers to second, Joey Fisher to third, Adam Jeffrey to fourth, Clinton Bourne overall 12th place then. David Tangway overall 13th, Richard Cecil overall 14th, but there could be joy and jubilation on the horizon. Across the line then, Brandon Carr wins in AM. Alpine victorious in the AM category. That might very well be a first here for the A110, and Brandon Carr will be over the moon with a result like that on a recent transfer. It was a controversial one to make the leap across to Alpine. It's been quite a divisive brand on this grid. You can see he is beside himself with joy today. And this is just race 1 of 2, one must consider. An absolutely jubilous result from Brandon Carr. Great result for him today. Close finish across the line then for Grenier Massey v Sanchez. Grenier Massey makes second in the AMS, and rounding out the podium then looks to be, yes, that of Didier Potvin. Much to the dismay of Karina Stinson, who otherwise looked on track to be seeing her first division podium of the season. By looks of it, may have missed out. We'll see, though. We will see when the final result comes through. At the end of race 1, however, conclusive result is right now Christian LeBay wins for the first time in Season 4. Now back onto leading form. George Todd in second, Brandon Davitt in third. Your division winners outside of Pro, then semi-pro for Aidan Christie and AM for Brandon Carr. We'll wait for the final result to come on through. I believe we are waiting for a few drivers here, but down to the line goes Fabian Yahure at the end of race 1. I believe because we still have a few drivers that are unaccounted for, we do have to wait for the session end marker as we watch back in with the pit lane, waiting for those final results to come up then. What we do know at the moment then, your 3 division winners, as mentioned before, LeBay, Christie and Carr, the end of race 1 of 2. Now, getting a glance over towards the regulations just quickly here, as we do now have a look at the final results. Coming up in a moment's time will likely then be race 2, another 40 minutes of racing. Now, it is worth considering we have had a few problems there with disconnects. We're not quite sure yet what the response is looking like from race control. But you do get the final result there. Christian LeBay wins in race 1. Looking further down the order then, Todd second, David third, Simard fourth, Vekere fifth, Benton in sixth, Martel seventh, Christie wins in division. And then behind him, Peppers 9th, Fisher 10th, Jeffrey 11th, Bourne 12th, Tangway 13th, and Carr wins in division as well in the AMS 14th. Jackal 15th, Velkamp 16th, Grenier Massey 17th, Sanchez 18th, Cecil 19th, and Potvin rounds out the top 20. Then further down the line from 20th to the rest of the grid, Pereira, Stinson, Belbray, Miles Romano, Malherbe, Risti, Zavala, Yahure, Peacock, and then your DNS then Macmillan, Winnings, and Shanosky. We wait then for the grid to form up at the end of race 1. Waiting then for the grid to form back up onto race 2. And with those multiple disconnects there, it's going to be quite the great schism formed in this grid. There's going to be plenty of drivers displaced down towards the back of the order of what was a 33-car grid to start the session off. We're not sure exactly if that's going to be the number we find ourselves presented with in towards race 2 as we still wait here for the grid to form up. And looking on towards that calendar again before we see the grid, our next race coming up after today will be in Kyalami at round 3 of the championship on our one and only visit to continental Africa, the home of the former South African Grand Prix then for round 3 on our first triple sprint of the season. And then we head back into Europe for 5 rounds on the trot in continental Europe, spanning across Germany, Austria, Belgium and Great Britain. And we go to see the Nürburgring for the first enduro race of the season, then back on to the same rotation of formats: standard, dash races, triple sprint, and enduro across the Red Bull Ring, Zolder, Alton Park, and Snetterton. Then we head to the US, where we get to see Watkins Glen and Indianapolis, then Bathurst for the penultimate round of the championship, and the season finale, 90 minutes of racing at the Circuit of the Americas, just on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, at round 12 on August 25th. That'll be August 26th at 1 a.m. BST for those tuning in from the UK. After a muddled first race then, new division wins this season for Christie and Carr. LeBay onto winning form once more for his first win of Season 4 after missing out in Valencia to wishful winnings. Will find himself quite a fair few down the order after his disconnect on the formation grid. We do see for this second of two races, nighttime conditions crawling in for the second race of today. 40 minutes like the first we saw from before, with plenty of drivers displaced. A new look at the grid, but one thing remains the same. LeBay at the head of the field. The 119 still on pole position, but George Todd now shifts to second place, even though he'll start on that third place grid slot. Brandon David makes third, with Dylan Vekere in fourth, Vincent Simard in fifth, and Carl Martel in sixth. Richard Cecil will start seventh, with Adam Jeffrey starting on division pole in the semi-pros. Behind him will be Ruben Pereira in a division second and ninth overall. Justin Benton rounds out the top 10, with Clinton Bourne in 11th and David Tanguay in 12th. Didier Potvin will head up the field for the AM category. I believe that remains the same here for that number 35. He'll start up and ahead of Chili Peppers and Aiden Christie. Joey Fisher will start on 16th place ahead of Brandon Carr in 17th, the Jackal in 18th, and Sanchez in 19th, rounding out the top 20, Cedric Grenier-Massey in the 626 BMW. Behind them, Andrew Velkamp in 21st, Adrian Mallup in 22nd, and Karina Stinson in 23rd, Thomas Romano in 24th, and Casey Malles in 25th, Curtis Bell-Bray in 26th, and Ray Risti in 27th, Matthew Shinosky in 28th, Adrian Zavala in 29th, and Wishful Winnings rounds out the top 30. Behind them, Brad Peacock, Fabian Yohure, and Isaac McMillan. Multiple drivers displaced then. You can see starts there, I'd say roughly with Shinosky, and then ends with McMillan. To find currently 6 cars out of position from Shinosky, Zavala, Winnings, Peacock, Yohure, and McMillan. That has kept a lot of the same constants here, especially up in Pro, with LeBay still leading that charge. You know, have a little bit more open room, but we saw in that first race start, even in the same position, Todd was able to put on a very, very vibrant start. We got to see some great action from behind with David and Vekere, as well as Simard and Martel. Definitely some high hopes then for Adam Jeffrey. Has the position up over that of Aiden Christie. Ruben Pereira definitely has a good shot at things here. Found himself an early casualty in race 1. Hopefully the chance exists then for him to right those wrongs heading in towards race 2 today. 40 minutes like the race following from behind in our second and last visit on today's round here at round 2 of Season 4, the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. On board then with the 119 heading back in to the formation lap in nighttime conditions. 9:02 p.m. local time here in Barcelona. Colder conditions than race 1 and less visibility to boot. So it's going to be a much more difficult start to the race than last, as we're on board with Christian LeBay after reveling in his first victory of the season. The 3-time defending champion was off to a bit of an odd start in Valencia, but has returned to the same form that he has governed over the last 3 seasons in succession after today's first race of 2. Adam Jeffrey, recent drama then for the 42, now starts from the pit lane, forfeiting what was otherwise a pole position in the semi-pros. Pulling up and away then from the grid, the 119, followed by the number 12 and then the number 16. What was our podium in Pro at the end of race 1 will once again govern the start on race 2. And that is the replay system, not what we're looking for. Force of habit, trying to go back into the return to garage menu so we could take a wider look at things there. That's full-on muscle memory. Nothing more, nothing less. You know, the upside of that is it didn't crash the game this time, which is lovely. Because if I was on Series S, that would have fried it to a crisp and would have burnt a sizable hole in the desk. According to Adam Jeffrey, I think that may have been a controller disconnect for the 42 that has kept him from starting in position on today's grid. Still leaves us with 33 cars, but many of which now displaced from their current positions on track. It's going to make for a very muddled start towards the back of that field. For LeBay, the load has only gotten lighter for him as he starts up and ahead of Todd and David, two drivers he was able to triumph over in race one. But will he be so lucky this time around? Only time will tell. So making our way down through Kamsa corner. Looking around this order here to see some ones to watch. Of course, keeping an eye out for the 99 and the 120 on your screens at the moment. Carl Martel and Vincent Simard. Also the car up in front of them, Dylan Vekere, who had a brilliant defensive fight over the course of race one today. Looking around the field also to see if we can locate the Audi here. Keep an eye out for that one. Division winner in race one. Aidan Christie, the number 32 Audi R8, will be one to watch in the semi-pros over the course of this race. Also keep an eye out, though, for Ruben Pereira. Can't show it this time as we're trying to catch back on board with the leaders as we make our way in towards Sector 3 for the start of the formation process. I believe is the case here where he will actually physically start up and alongside LeBay. It was just a case where grid slot didn't dictate that for the start of the formation lap. Nonetheless, as we make our way down towards Catalonia corner at turn 16 here, barreling into another 40 minutes of racing, this time cloaked in the shade of nighttime here in race 2 of round 2 of season 4, the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malwar Transport and live exclusively on TRTN. Down to the line we go. 33 cars in attendance, but multiple from the pit lane as we are green and racing for the second and last time today here in Barcelona. A great start from that front row, and even better start from the second row behind as they filter in. It's down towards the line. Here we go. In towards turns 1 and 2. 4, 5, 6 cars in contention as we head in towards turn 1. Leading that charge, though, is the Chevrolet, but later onto the brakes there to try and go up and around the outside. The number 12 Mercedes of George Todd. Definitely went for the courageous send of things there, but came up empty-handed as he now falls back in behind, now 2 abreast with the number 16. It's Bedlam, I'm told, on the race start. Getting a look down the order here to see the calamity that has fallen in place down the opening straight here. The number 35 is one of our casualties, and also collected, rather heartbreakingly so, was last race's Division AM winner. Brandon Carr, an early casualty for Alpine after a disastrous start in an incident between himself and Didier Potvin. Back in a green flag conditions as we get a good angle of things here from Richard Cecil's point of view. He's tucked in behind Clinton Bourne and Carl Martel. He's got clear line of sight on that race lead up in front of him. Glove noting as well for Bourne, a much more elbows out start, one that has definitely rewarded him in the long run. On this start of race 2. LeBay leads up over Todd as we head down towards Lakaiha for the first time. On board here with Richard Cecil. Curious change then for Cecil, of course, having moved away from Porsche over towards Mercedes. We saw there was a bit of trouble for him with track limits, but I wouldn't say that's on the fault of the car. Getting a look then back up at the head of the field after trying to analyse what was a very, very muddled start. We see getting a little further up the order, side-by-side action there. Now filters back in a single file between these two, Dylan Vekere and George Todd, as Brandon David now takes second. On board here with Dylan Vekere. Caught between a rock and a hard place. It's not an easy spot for him to be in because that 120 is just cruising right up to his rear bumper in this fight for fourth. Heading up towards turns 1 and 2. Vincent Simard on the inside. We see way on late on the brakes there was the number 99. That was Carl Martel. Kamikaze down through to turn 1. We find here for Vekere. He falls in behind the 120 and now the door is wide enough to see the arrival of the number 6 in this now found fight for 5th. Meanwhile, the 626 is into the pit lane emergency stop for the 626. I believe that's Curtis Belbray that has come to an abrupt stop. Multiple casualties then in that first lap, and it was before we even got to turn 1 where some of those incidents occurred. We saw namely for car and I believe there for Potvin in the AM category was recent calamities on the start of that race. We see here for Vekray, he is squeezed right up to the rear bumper of the number 6 of Clinton Bourne with Milk Crate Racing Chevrolet. Behind them, that's Richard Cecil. Take a look then on the wider perspective of things. LeBay leads over Brandon David. Now, I want to point this out. This has not been a firmly held lead here for LeBay. That is a gap that is waning down between himself and the Mercedes of Brandon David, and not too far off his trails is the number 12 of George Todd in third. Vincent Simard holds fourth over Clinton Bourne in fifth. Dylan Vekray in sixth. Richard Cecil in seventh. Carl Martel in eighth. And David Tanguay in ninth. Rounding out the top 10, Ruben Pereira leads in the semi-pros in the number 8 Mercedes. He's up over Wishful Winnings, who I would like to point out started from plumb last and now finds himself in 11th. A formidable start then from the 23, who won in Valencia 2 weeks ago at the start of the season. Whilst his Spanish campaign has certainly given him quite a series of highs and lows, there is still one more race to be fought for in the opening 2 rounds of the championship before they head away from Europe and over towards Africa. Andrew Veldkamp then 12th, division 2nd in the semi-pros. He's up over Adrian Zavala, division 3rd and 13th overall. It's also worth pointing out light winnings. Zavala started towards the back of this grid. Chili Peppers in 14th overall. Sanchez from behind there in 15th. So rounding out what is actually the division top 5 there, Holkianos Motorsports is Ivan Sanchez. A quiet procession to the top 5 then for the Spaniard as he finds himself rocketing down through turns 1, 2 and 3. Behind him, Fabian Yahure in 16th. Curtis Belbray. It was not Belbray we thought was in trouble. The 626 was actually Cedric Grenier-Massey. Belbray, actually, as it stands to be the case, finds himself much cheerier than we would have thought, because the number 15, amidst the calamity that prevailed over the start of that race, actually has placed the Breaking Point Racing number 15 Chevrolet of Curtis Belbray at the lead of the AMs. Joey Fisher in 18th, the Jackal in 19th, Thomas Romano rounds out the top 20 behind him. See the very, very small headlights, the Maserati of Karina Stinson, rounding out the AM podium. That could be second, well within her grasp, heading up towards turn 6. Now up and ahead of Thomas Romano, one of the drivers for Team Raceline Sim. We see, though, this is a war on 2 fronts between these two, as neither the Audi nor the Maserati are particularly comfortable for these two at this time. Stinson falls back in behind to the last of the podium spots in AM. Behind them, I believe that is Isaac McMillan. Matthew Shinosky in 23rd. Brandon Carr in a wounded Alpine, 24th. Ray Risty in 25th. Casey Miles in 26th. Adam Jeffrey in 27th. In what looks to be a possibly... No, he's not damaged. There's no damage there on that Chevrolet. We actually see that he's 28th, because up in front of him, that's Brad Peacock in 27th for McLaren. In the pit lane then, Potvin, Grenier-Massey, and looking here in 31st is Justin Benton in the number 21. Looking to go and catch on board then with Milk Crate Racing's Clinton Bourne. This could be a rather curious one to watch. We do see the car from behind him. Dylan Vekray has got front row tickets to this fight. We do have yellow flags out. That's for David Tanguay, the number 30, stricken down at turns 1 and 2. Now falls in behind the 91, so down to 16th goes David Tanguay after recent troubles down at the Elf chicane. So once again, back on board to the Chevys. We do see that's recent trouble for that, I believe, yes, George Todd. That's a curious one. One of the podium sitters now recently beset by troubles, and that has now invited in the 120 towards the podium. So Vincent Simard now into third. We see here for George Todd trying to defend away 9th. Sorry, not 9th. I believe that is looking here. Not 100% sure on this one. I believe that might be actually 7th, if I'm not mistaken. Regardless, the 99 looking for the inside. The number 23 from behind. That's Wishful Winnings. So nearly made contact with the cars in front. This is yes, it is for 7th place there for George Todd. Up over Carl Martel and Wishful Winnings. Richard Cecil up in front of him. So that's actually 4 in a row there on Malwar Racing cars. A bit of a civil war brewing with these drivers. Of course, civility at the forefront of their driving attitude, but how long exactly are these drivers going to perform under this kind of pressure before the pretenses of this more gentlemanly lifestyle among the team collapses inwards and we start to see some proper Hamilton-Rosberg level chicanery And we're better a circuit than here than at Barcelona to see something of the like happen. So, recent updates find that fight between Bourne and Simard elevated to podium status. Between Simard and Bourne. Behind them, Dylan Beckere. Richard Seesaw from behind them, then Todd, then Martel, then Winnings. All very close there in a daisy chain of cars making their way up through turn 3. You see here, Wishful Winnings sets his sights upon a move on the inside on Carl Martel. We've seen, historically speaking, Martel to be one of the more tolerant drivers to teammates trying to get the leg up here. We did see he had much more of a gentleman's agreement in the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series with Byron Forrest. Will he be so civil this time around? Of course, many of these drivers still with a point to prove in the pro category. Right now, they hold 9 of the top 10 positions. Behind them is Ruben Pereira, who is himself trying to forge more of a distance over 4.5 seconds over Adrian Zavala in second. Looking back up at the head of the field, namely for that fight on the podium right now, as current updates from the leading 2 remain rather stale here, about 1 second floating just under between Brandon David and Christian LeBay, but not teetering any closer than that as we drop into the first 10 minutes of race 2. Vincent Simard versus Clinton Bourne, 0.7 of a second at their last interval down through the RACC chicane. Now Bourne definitely has a few rather nasty flashbacks to this section, so we'll not be looking to make history repeat itself. It has been actually a lot more, as it would happen to be the case, a lot more aggressive with the curbs, but it's actually been to his benefit here because he's riding the middle of the car over that curb instead of trying to tuck one side over it. That's what led to his incident through Eurocar into the RACC chicane last season. That was one of 2 major rollover incidents. I believe there was Barcelona and then later Zandvoort that saw a similar incident, both of which ended up going a bit viral on the internet among the drivers and the local driver space. Behind, we do note here the emergence of a new chapter of sorts between Martel and Winnings as they get closer and closer. Winnings looking for the inside. He is going to try and squeeze in there. The gap did exist, and he did go for it, albeit he was definitely praying more so than anything for the hesitance of that 99 to make that move possible. If the 99 reacted even a millisecond later than that, that would have been contact, and that could have ended very ugly between the pair. But otherwise, very stern approach to things there, but he's rewarded with an 8th place spot. Meanwhile, looking here, Peppers v Sanchez for a Division 4th in the semi-pros. Of course, Chili Peppers was a component of that fight for the podium in semi-pro in race 1. And we see there, that's trouble from behind for the 91, I believe, just avoiding the wall. But a big scare for the Mercedes of Ivan Sanchez at turn 7. The nose dove into that section of the back end. Was it willing to follow? Winnings v Todd. Latest on the cards then, Martel in behind. And this is a scary thing to see because Winnings and Todd do share much alike in the fact that if the gap exists for a move, safety doesn't often become part of the considerations. We've seen Todd get his elbows out before. I think there was a very notorious fight he had last season in Silverstone that can attest to that argument in GT4. And for Wishful Winnings, we're seeing it right now tonight, that he is not afraid to start clawing through the crowd if it means a position is in his reach. Question is, like the story of Icarus, is he going to fly too close to the sun here and have his wings melt up on him? He must consider the drivers he's fighting with at this time are his own teammates. Could this affect his standing within the team? It seems to be the case that joining up with Malwar Racing has not done a particularly great deal to shackle the ambitions on Winnings, similar to his time when he was a privateer in the season before. They've not really been able to tame him just quite yet, as it would be the case. He is still willing to fight tooth and nail, even with his own teammates, if it means he can get that position up. And that's the kind of ambition that does make for some grand viewing. We've seen it already here from Winnings. He has put on quite the theatrics in tonight's racing. And really he's had to, because he's had his back against the wall. The fact that he stands in 8th place, having started from outside of 30th, because of his disconnect in race 1, I think stands a testament to the caliber of driver Wishful Winnings is on this grid. And I don't think it came as any surprise then that he got that win in Valencia, because we're seeing a lot of the same form today. If the stars had aligned just a little bit better and he hadn't had that disconnect, I'd have no doubts in my mind that 23 could have contested a race win today. So he'll have to settle for what stands as a fight for 7th place. But I wouldn't say that's too much to scoff at, because I'd say up and around the corner, actually, as it happens to be the case with Richard Cecil, just up in front of them here. The number 5, 6th place at the moment, is being approached by the number 12, and in turn the 23 and the 99. And then not too far away, the number 8 and the 46. Speaking of the 8 and the 46, that gap has come down 1.6 seconds, 4.6 to 3. But after that run out wide at Catalunya, that's come up now, so it's about 9/10 it's come down from. Sorry, 1.1 seconds, not 9/10. Looking here, George Todd versus Richard Cecil. We'll try and go and catch on board from any of the Mercedes cars here on board with George Todd. Contesting that 6th place spot. 3 Mercedes cars wrapped up in civil war. The 5, the 12 and the 23. We see for Richard Cecil as well, it's been a case, especially since that drive-through in race 1. He's been trying to keep his head low a little bit, out of trouble. He knows he needs the points on the table here before he starts setting any higher ambitions. Right now is the case where he's going to himself weigh up. What are my odds on defending these two away? I think right now he's just seen how things have been very rocky for them in through turn 7. Watching here from George Todd, who now kicks the door open for the 23, who's going to be going up alongside him. Down towards turn 10 at Lakaiha, but bear in mind, Todd will be to the inside. Has he sold himself short at Lakaiha? He does run deep into it, and the 23's up and ahead. Wishful Winnings driving like a man possessed tonight. And it has been quite the thriller then from the number 23, making his way to the RACC chicane. And now sets his sights on yet another target. 6th place up in front of him, Richard Cecil in the iron sights of the number 23, who seems at this rate unstoppable. Actually, a little bump there, so we're getting almost NASCAR style between these two, but he can't bump too many times, so this is going to end rather ugly. Last of the late breakers then was the 23, but the number 5 holds the inside, then the outside, but if he can hold it still, the inside once again. A little bit of a bump there at turn 2, and so nearly upset, but Winnings from outside at turn 3. Keeps his foot buried in the floor, but he holds only, well, it looks of it there, a few meters up over the nose on that number 5. The number 12 trying to come from the outside there, then to put himself to the inside at Sayat corner, so Richard Cecil swamped in by his fellow comrades. We see from behind, Richard Cecil holds his ground from George Todd. Wishful Winnings procures 6th place. His next target then, another Mercedes car, but this time not one of the Malwar Racing Team cars. 3.2 seconds up in front of him. The 161 of Dylan Vekere would be next on his target list for that top 5. And if he can really, I put this on the cards here, if he can turn this into a top 5, that's an easy driver of the day. I wouldn't need to blink twice at the suggestion of such. The fact that he's been able to do what he's been able to do, as we see from behind, George Todd now overtakes Richard Cecil into Lakaiha as they go side by side up towards turn 11. Worth noting, Cecil was still with there, but is forced to filter in behind. Actually, that's George Todd filtering in behind Richard Cecil, so hats off there to Cecil on the defence. Difficult to make things out here in the cloak of night time with those Mercedes cars. All we're really getting to see is the headlights there. We're a little too far away to make out anything on the LED boards. Down through the RACC chicane. The 23, you can see, has really just picked himself up by his bootstraps and got going here. He's not wasting any time. Time is money, and he does not want to be bankrupt today. From behind, Cecil v. Todd picks up into a new chapter. Watching on board here with the number 5, defending away on that 7th place spot. You see George Todd gets all over the shop, trying to get on to the inside line off of that number 5. The number 12 like a bull in a china shop here. All over the place, trying to find room. This constant pressure, he's trying to whittle down Richard Cecil for that 7th place spot, but he is hemorrhaging a lot of time to the cars behind him with the arrival there of Karl Martel. And I believe just in behind him there is Ruben Pereira. Pereira, of course, gunning for his first division victory here in the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Actually, no, I don't believe that's not Ruben Pereira. Who is that then behind the number 99? It's the number 21. That's Justin Benton in 28th. That is a curious one. Meanwhile, we see what is just absolute civil war here at Malwar Racing. George Todd versus Richard Cecil. Meanwhile, updates from the front lines. The gap now between Lebay and David at 3.2 seconds. Meanwhile, we see here the update on a new fight for third. Ivan Sanchez versus Chili Peppers for third in semi-pro. Now reaches new heights here with the Mercedes having taken up third off of Aston Martin. They're 13th and 14th overall. Wishful Winnings 2 seconds away from Dylan Vekere. He is swiftly closing that gap down. He's hunting him down. There's blood in the water and he can smell it. The 23 is on the charge. And this is going to be an exciting battle to see as we head towards the halfway mark of race 2. Meanwhile, having a glance in here for George Todd, he does find himself sandwiched in between Richard Cecil and Karl Martel in 8th place at the moment. Ruben Pereira is 2.9 seconds away from that pack. The car we see in behind the 99 at this time being the number 21 of Justin Benton down in 28th. As for Pereira, he holds 2.5 seconds over Zavala in a Mercedes 1-2 in semi-pro. Looking all the way down here to the AMS, finding Curtis Belbray leading that division at this time.
Not over yet.
Thomas Romano in second, Matthew Shanosky in third, Brandon Carr in fourth. It's Karina Stinson that rounds out the top 5 in the AMS. We're halfway through the session with Lebay in the lead. Looking to try and catch on board with that number 5 here, the defending of 2 in this fight for 7th place. It has been a very solid defence thus far by Richard Cecil. Away from George Todd. Entering Lakaiha here at turn 10. You see right onto his rear bumper. I don't think you could have got much closer if he tried there without an accident for George Todd. Down through to turn 12. You can see he's so much more aggressive on the accelerator out through the corners. He is really trying to sunder down gap between himself and Richard Cecil. Behind him, though, is that 99, so he is forfeiting a lot of ground with this elbows out approach. And by the looks of it there from behind, as we go to catch on board, cutting away here from Richard Cecil to go and look in with either of these two. Looking to try and locate at this time the number 12, as he does find himself now a victim of his own proceedings. He's hemorrhaged a lot of time here from Richard Cecil, and the driver he's invited in, none other than Karl Martel. You know, for the Mercedes, their worst enemy here, the Chevrolet, fastest in the straights, and with Slipstream to their aid, that 99 isn't going away anytime soon. Worth noting here the possibility of a fight on the podium as Brandon Carr looks to turn his fortunes around after a disastrous start to his race here in race 2. Of course, reveling away from a first ever division victory for Alpine. Now finds himself going the long distance to the RACC chicane. This is unfathomed from Brandon Carr, and I think he's just got that one there off the exit of Catalunya. Bravo. But ultimately on the straight, this is where the Alpine is going to lose a lot of ground, less than half the engine size and cylinder number. 1.8 litre 4-cylinder turbo versus 6.2 litre naturally aspirated V8, but looks can be deceiving here, and it's David and Goliath between Chevrolet and Alpine as Maserati nearly spins in the background. Brandon Carr leapt for it down at turns 1 and 2. Big things come in small packages then. The Alpine shows up Chevrolet for third in the AMS. Looking here for Karl Martel. front row tickets to the fight between Cecil and Todd. These three currently fighting as it stands for 7th. Meanwhile, Wishful Winnings is in a world of his own here, hunting down Dylan Vekray. That fight is soon to get him to the swing of things there. We do see them very close to each other on the map. Watching for Carl Martel. This is locally a fight for 8th between himself and George Todd. As escaping from frame there is Richard Cecil, about a second up from Martel, about 8 tenths up from Todd, in towards turns 1, 2 and 3. And as we see this fight going on, it's worth going to catch on board here in the fighting between Winnings and Vekray for the last of the top 5s. Drawing ever closer to the last 15 minutes of the race. Currently 16.5 left to go here on race 2. Wishful Winnings has been a man on a mission. I have never seen such a focused drive from him before until this evening, where he has really had to dig deep on this performance and is delivered on one of the most outstanding drives we've seen so far this season. Of course, revelled in his first ever win in this series in round 1 at Valencia, but in his Spanish double-header to kick the season off, it has been quite the showing from that number 23, and I still think we've yet to see all of it. So do thoroughly look forward to the rest of the season from the point of view of that 23. Watching in here with his fellow Mercedes, the number 12 of George Todd has got his hands full here. A rather full plate for that number 12 up in front of him, contesting with Richard Cecil for 7th out back, trying to defend 8th place away from Carl Martel. Not an easy task then, but Todd has risen to the occasion here and is dealing very well with the pressure thus far. 15.5 minutes left to go on race 2 today. Number 23, we're back on board with Wishful Winnings, as he continues to fight here for 5th place with Dylan Vekray. It's a curious sight indeed when one considers Vekray and David, neither of which affiliated with the larger teams on this grid, but are still carving out their own niche amongst the crowd here. Garage 16, I believe, is the team for Brandon David. 161 Motorsports was Dylan Vekray's unit in this team's championship. As we see there, Wishful Winnings now up and ahead into 5th. We see all is not so peaches and cream, though, under traction. Well, number 23 sliding his way out from turn 2, but it was equal troubles for the 161 off the exit of turn 3 at Renault Corner. Now we head up towards Repsol. The 161 still hugging all the way to the left-hand side, trying to go for the most aggressive of lines here at Repsol to try and set himself up to go side by side in towards Seat. It's a tough one to call. The 161, will he come up short? He's got a more aggressive run down through Seat. That could gear him up to turn 6 and turn 7. Out behind them, Todd and Cecil still contend 7th. Martel not too far away either. And it's worth noting, getting closer is Ruben Pereira, now up and ahead of Justin Benton. Meanwhile, taking a look here to find now, Thomas Romano having hemorrhaged 1.3 seconds from Brandon Carr, who is now 2nd in the AMS. We saw his move up towards 3rd not long ago, but on a bit of a conquest here in the Alpine. He finds himself actually only 5.9 seconds from the lead, currently governed in AM by Curtis Belbray of Breaking Point Racing. So Breaking Point seeing a 1-2 in the AMS at the moment. You see here for George Todd, still hounded in 8th place by Carl Martel. Momentarily had that position snatched away from him, but now he finds his way back up and ahead of the Chevrolet. Down through the RACC chicane, a little bit of a bump there off exit, I believe that was for the 99, but he is plenty close enough to see a position in grasp. Seeing here for Carl Martel, fighting that 8th place spot with George Todd, going on at the same time as the fight currently for 5th. The counter-attack, I should say, for Dylan Vekray on Wishful Winnings, down through to turn 1. See up in front, super late onto the brakes there was George Todd, but he may have left the door open for Carl Martel off the exit of turn 2 and a turn 3. Richard Cecil has done a grand job here to defend 7th place from Todd, who's been relentless in his pursuits, but is his tunnel vision going to get the head of him here? Going to get the better of him in the long run, because if he keeps lasering in on that car in front, he's going to lose sight of the 99 and the number 8 behind him. That could be costly. Got a catch back on board then with drivers over the course of this race on with the 99. Oh, that's contact up in front. Richard Cecil turned around by George Todd, who in turn clatters into the 99. Ruben Pereira gets into the mix there, and following along with him, that's Adrian Zavala. The two leading semi-pros now find themselves sandwiched amongst the fray. George Todd still stuck in behind that of Richard Cecil. An enraged Carl Martel now tries to carve his way back up and ahead of Adrian Zavala, but it's fickle in its early attempts there. He's going to be seeing red. That was not his position to lose. He had no reason to have lost those positions. It was a calamity up in front of him that took him down a few pegs there with the two semi-pros, but he may have his chances come up very early here as he continues to set his sights on Adrian Zavala. The Mercedes, of course, no slouch, but it is finding itself increasingly vulnerable on the straights. But not this one. Glides his way up towards turn 1. Looking here for George Todd, number 12, still fighting with that number 5 in front. And they saw new heights to their conflict then. A real fracture point starting to emerge at Maloir Racing up in the Pro Division. Of course, they still hold the cards on all 3 tiers of the team's championship. But with success comes struggle. And we're starting to see the fractures form in what has otherwise been an airtight unit. Down through Sayat. Hammers the throttle here off exit. George Todd looking to go side by side with Richard Cecil. Down through turn 6, now towards turn 7. He's got the inside. Cecil's to the outside, squeezing the number 5 on through as he filters in behind. Right behind him is Ruben Pereira. Up through turn 9 then. George Todd now emerges 7th. And having a glance in at the fighting, now having come to a cease between Winnings and Vekere. 2.6 seconds between the pair of them. A new fight emerges, however, for Brandon David versus Vincent Simard. Chevrolet looking at their chances of a return to 1-2 finishes after Mercedes took center stage in Valencia and denied them the opportunity in race 1. Simard looks to set the record straight then for the dominant manufacturer of this championship. Meanwhile, for Mercedes, their own internal struggles continue here across 2 categories. To have noting for Zavala v Pereira, this is the fight for the lead in semi-pro. And speaking of fights for the lead, dare I say it, Brandon Carr is quickly catching up. I want to point this out to Curtis Belpre. Now, if the chances exist for that Triple Eight, who was, as we saw, clattered on lap 1 on the opening straight before he even made it to turn 1, turns this around into a victory. I mean, my post in considering the driver of the day here to be wished for Winnings, having started from 30 wherever, I think it was just outside of the top 30th, and made his way to a top 5. That's great, but this is also right up there with it. I'd say you'd have to hold it to both regards there. It's a tough one to call. Richard Cecil still along with George Todd here off the exit of Sayat corner. 8 minutes left to go. Vincent Simard continuing to pile intensity here on Brandon David. 6 tenths apart, down through turn 10, now to turn 11. Meanwhile, worth pointing this out, now having gotten, by looks of things here, up and ahead of Adrian Zavala, is David Tanguay, who now enters the mix on this newfound fight amongst the top 10. We see Carl Martel side by side with Ruben Pereira, who is in turn not too far away from the number 12 of George Todd in towards Lakaya. We see the number 99 hooks onto the curb there, and that very nearly spun him around, but it has lost him a lot of time. We do have yellow flags out. But who for? The number 30. It's David Tanguay. And that's trouble for him there on his efforts to try and catch up with the rest of the field. Tanguay pulls it to the side. Is that a retirement here from Tanguay in race 2? Yes, it certainly is. A bitter bitter end on race 2 for that number 30. Made his way back up through the field, but it's all come undone in one corner. 7 minutes left to go. Martel v Pereira for 9th place. Meanwhile, Simon versus David up at the front of the field there for 2nd. Pereira still leads semi-pro, but is now defending away from Karl Martel. And he wants to keep Martel behind him because that acts as a buffer point between himself and Adrian Zavala. We see though trouble down at turns 1 and 2. Zavala's got the chance. Making his way through Renault corner. Adrian Zavala, who was sundered from his chances in race 1 to take a division win in the semi-pros, now finds one presented in front of him. But who will take that gold in the semi-pro? Will it be Ruben Pereira? Will it be Adrian Zavala? 6.5 minutes left to go on race 2 will tell us different. Meanwhile, looking back up towards 2nd, David versus Simard. Brandon David doing a stand-up job there to hold off Vincent Simard for that 2nd place spot. 6 minutes left to go in this race. Looking as things start to simmer down. Richard Cecil back up in 7th. George Todd 8th. Karl Martel in 9th. Ruben Pereira holds ground, but only thinly so over Adrian Zavala in semi-pro. And running out wide there into turn 11 and 12. The door is open, and taking the opportunity, now leading semi-pro, Adrian Zavala in the number 46 against the odds is back on leading form after his disconnect in race 1. That is ecstatic stuff there for the 46. Making his way down through turn 16. 5 minutes left to go. The Mexican talent, this has been a stand-up job for him here, has really had to play against the odds, carving his way up through the field here in race 2 at Catalunya. Find himself at the head of the field, but he can't celebrate too early. He's got to keep his eyes on the prize here. His first ever division win looms yonder the horizon. Looking back through the order to 3rd and 2nd in the continuing fight between Simard and David up in the pro category. Meanwhile, looking down the order to now find recent updates from the AMS as Curtis Bell-Bray steps down from the race lead, now 3 seconds behind the new race leader, Brandon Carr. The fact that Carr's been able to do that with such heavy damages on his Alpine has been a formidable feat here from the 888 from Breaking Point Racing. They still stare down the sights here of a 1-2 in division. Of Shinosky in 3rd. The 616 in behind Curtis Bell-Bray there. That is Andrew Veldkamp down in 25th. The Bell-Bray, there have been a few bumps and upsets there down through Sector 1. You see for the Alpine now leading that charge. Newfound fight here, McMillan v Jackal. Isaac McMillan, of course, was recently relegated from the pros, now joins the semi-pro lineup from round 2 onwards. You can see as it stands right now fighting for the last of the top 5 spots after the recent recapture of the lead by Zavala over Pereira. We see side by side between the Jackal and Isaac McMillan going the long distance here at turn 12. The question is, will he find himself with any room down at turn 13? No being the answer at this time. The two rub as they head in towards Eurocar. Now the RACC chicane. And is he looking for it? Yes, going for the inside, as going way out wide was the 999. The door's open and going for it on the inside at Catalunya, but runs short of it. The 61 still incredibly close to a top 5. It has not been an easy road for him to travel on here, and we can see animosity building between himself and the 999 of the Jackal for Breaking Point Racing. Making their way up towards turns 1, 2, and 3. Looking for the inside. The 61 leaps for it on the 999, and it's contact between the pair of them. The 999 is turned around. Yellow flags out down in Sector 1 after contact between Isaac McMillan and the Jackal. Their rivalry boils over here on race 2. Back in the green flag conditions. McMillan Now up into that top 5, but that will be one likelier than not then contested by the Jackal, who in turn now drops to 7th behind Joey Fisher, who now moves up into a Division 6th. 2 minutes left to go. In the case of Christian LeBay, he's got, I believe, on the cards here just one more lap after this one, but it'll be by seconds between himself and the rest of the grid. Vincent Simard knows he has 2 more laps here to attempt that run for second place to secure a 1-2 for Chevrolet and for Malwar Racing. Brandon David has put on a sensational performance for Garage 16. Getting out past there, the 315. I believe that's Ray Aristi of Team Raceline Sim. In behind them, Bourne v Winnings. Now for 4th. And it's this relentless pursuit of position here for Wishful Winnings. I'd not thought it possible that he'd be seeing the chances of 4th place, but here we are, met by less than a second's worth of a gap, getting closer now to less than half of a second, where Wishful Winnings has carved his way up from outside the top 30. An outcast of the grid after race 1 saw a disconnect for him. The 23, believe it or not, stands among the top 5, right now contesting 4th. There's recovery drives, and then there's what we're seeing today. We've seen some formidable recovery drives over multiple championships, but I think we're staring down the barrel of the best in GT4 from Wishful Winnings. That would be a tough one to match. Down through to the RACC chicane, so not long then from the start of the last lap of racing. The 119 crosses down through turn 16 to the line out of Catalunya curve. 10 seconds on the line here as we make our way across into that final lap.
Give it a final push.
One last push here for the 120. It's all or nothing now for second place for Vincent Simard. The charge is on. Taking a look here. It is worth illustrating this point. What happened here for Richard Cecil? Where is Richard Cecil? That's actually a great question. Oh no, don't tell me it was a disconnect there for that number 5. That is heartbreaking. You see then fighting between Carl Martel and George Todd. They're side by side onto the last lap, down through to turns 1, 2 and 3. Here in the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. At round 2 of Season 4 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Down through turn 3 we go. Not far behind him, I should point out, is the semi-pro leader, Adrian Zavala, in the number 46. And yes, I believe we are starting to get news through now of a disconnect there for the number 5. That is gut-wrenching for Richard Cecil when you consider how swell a defense he had over the course of race 2 today. Seeing here with Simard versus David in front of them, I believe that is Karina Stinson for Maserati. It's contact. Brandon David hit from behind, and that does invite in opportunities here for Wishful Winnings, who is now ahead of Clinton Bourne down through La Caja. Making his way down to the RACC chicane. It's going to be a close one for the field in behind him, but this one has still been led tooth and nail by Christian LeBay. He took a win on race 1 today, but goes double here in Barcelona. The checkered flag is out. Race 2's win goes to Christian LeBay. Now his 2nd win of the season. Down to the line, Brandon David by a hair's width. Holding the cards.
The leader has finished the race.
Across the line then, Brandon David takes it by 0.2 of a second. Vincent Simard for 3rd, Wishful Winnings for 4th. Clinton Bourne for 5th. Dylan Vecchiere charges down to the line there for 6th place. George Todd for 7th. Carl Martel right in behind him, but it's worth keeping note of the drivers in behind. Is making our way towards the line there. George Todd looks to hold the ground of 7th over Carl Martel for 8th, but Adrian Zavala on a world-class turnaround wins in semi-pro by 0.3 of a second over Ruben Pereira. That is quite the accolade there. Zavala, who disconnected in race 1, victorious in race 2. That's a silver lining, had ever I'd seen one down in semi-pro. Sanchez in third. Rounds out the semi-pro podium. Peppers in fourth. McMillan to see a top 5. Controversially so, if we remember the contact between himself and the Jackal. Fisher to see 6th. Behind him, the Jackal for Division 7th. Have a glance in here, though. I never thought we'd see this one. Back up at the lead after what happened to him on the opening lap of race 2. Brandon Carr, if memory does serve correct, was an incredibly early casualty, wiped out on the opening line, or the opening straight, making his way in towards race 2. But as the checkered flag looms for his arrival, making his way down through to turn 16, I don't quite believe what I'm seeing here. Already reveling from his first victory, it's double trouble for Brandon Carr against all odds there. Wins in Am. That is quite something there. What a week that's already come to be for Brandon Carr. That's joy and jubilation. I don't even think he thought he'd be seeing that victory in race 2 after how it started for him, but how it ended couldn't be sweeter for that Triple Eight. Double victories for Alpine. A win for Adrian Zavala in race 2 after a win for Aiden Christie in race 1. But up in Pro, we find all the same then. LeBay, double trouble victories in the 119, back on winning form. So your winners in race 2, you can see it's very neatly organized here on this final result, but you can see LeBay wins in Pro. In semi-pro, Adrian Zavala and Brandon Carr wins in Am. I should mention there for Zavala and Carr against all odds. Carr was wiped out on the first lap. Zavala started towards the back of the field because of a disconnect. I would say it's a tough pick here, but I'd say you've got 3 drivers of the day. Wishful winnings, having started outside of the top 30 to make his way in and amongst the top 5. Adrian Zavala, having worked from a disconnect back to a race win in division. Brandon Carr, annihilated on that first lap, was one of the earliest casualties of race 2, works his way back to a division win. I would say it's so tough to call, I'm having to give it all 3. A triple header of drivers of the day by category as well. That is just unfathomed between those 3 exemplary performances in race 2. What a result that's been. So your division winners over the course of this week and today's round, a doubleheader, of course. Both pro division wins went over to Christian LeBay. In the semi-pros, it went between Aiden Christie in race 1 and Adrian Zavala in race 2. And in the AMS, Brandon Carr on both occasions for Alpine and Breaking Point Racing. Curtis Bell-Bray sees the podium with Matthew Shinosky in third in the AMS. In terms of the semi-pros, Ruben Pereira on the podium with Sanchez in third for a Mercedes 1, 2, 3 in the semi-pros. And then in the pro category, Brandon David in second and Vincent Simard by 0.2 to see third place. Well, what a race that's been. And better late than never, I'd imagine, then after the troubles we had last week getting this event up and running here for round 2 of the championship. That concludes racing here at Barcelona and our last stop in Spain. But what an open to the season we've seen across Valencia and Barcelona to get us into season 4 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Our next stop then, June 23rd, otherwise the early hours of the morning on June 24th for those tuning in the UK. And in Europe, we'll be heading to Kyalami for the first triple sprint of the season as we head to the home of the former South African Grand Prix. That's all from us here on TRTN. If you're catching with us later this week, we're on with the folks at the Orange Line Racing ex-VSR group for their first round of their LMU GT3 Championship. We go live Friday evening this week, heading in towards the weekend on Saturday. Just quickly consulting what we've got coming up into the weekend. I believe on the Saturday we've got the first round of the Ginetta Summer Series or the Summer Challenge from HCCL, and then coming up in towards Sunday, of course, is the return of the NLRL Sunday League. Round 5 of the championship at Donington Park. It's going to be interesting to come back in at LMU later on this week with OLR ex-VSR, otherwise the Orange Line Racing ex-VSR group. Still not exactly sure what the full name of that conglomerate is, but it is that brand new merger that we got on with last week to see the first of their Porsche Super Cup races. What was an exciting start to their season over in Imola. That's all from us here on TRTN. More to follow later on this week. and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.